this a negotiation or the new rules of the game?
It could be either.
It is up to the president how he wants to negotiate.
The higher the tariff, the faster they come.
A 90-day pause is not an eradication.
The trade negotiations are moving quickly.
There will be deals cut.
Trust Bloomberg for all the context and clarity you need as the tariff and global economy story evolves.
This year's bear case, very quickly, becoming the base case.
Nobody covers tariffs like Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories.
And we're here, where the action starts in Sydney.
And in Tokyo, get ahead as the global trading day begins.
The Asia Trade, weekdays only on Bloomberg.
There are some things we take for granted. Life is finite and organic. But what if everything we know about being human, from how we come into the world to how we depart it, were about to be radically transformed? New ways of creating life that move baby making into the lab, defying the laws of reproduction. Once incurable diseases cured using digital replicas of our bodies that copy us right down to our cells. And as we confront the inevitability of death, the promise of digital eternity beckons. We find ourselves on the brink of a future where the very essence of what it means to live and die may change forever. Reproduction is being unbound from biology's old rules, expanding the paths to parenthood in ways you wouldn't believe. The first major technology that disrupted what we know of reproduction was IVF. Now, IVG, or in vitro gametogenesis, has created possibilities far beyond what IVF offered. The possibility to turn any cell in your body into a sperm or an egg.
My first introduction to IVG was from the person who developed the technology, Shinya Yamanake.
B-roll, take one. Are we ready? Mm-hmm.
He at that time had told me that it could be possible to change a skin cell into a sperm or egg cell. I thought it was going to be really far into the future, and I was surprised at how quickly we're at this discussion now. Development now is dynamic. It's not just one way. You can take normal cells like a blood cell or a brain cell that are fully committed to just doing one thing, and then say, you can go back to school. You can go back up the chain, become developmentally something much younger, a stem cell, and then go down a different path.
Stem cells are like blank pages that can be rewritten. In the case of IVG, they take a new path to become reproductive cells, the building blocks to make a baby.
All of these technologies are unnatural. Chemotherapy is unnatural. Eyeglasses are unnatural. It's not natural versus unnatural. For me, it's ethically unnatural or unethically unnatural. It's all unnatural.
Infertility affects anywhere from 12 to 17% of the population. And for some people, this is fine. They are not interested in starting a family. But for others, having a family is a deep need to have a child that's biologically related. And so in vitro gametogenesis could be an option for that person who doesn't make their own gametes to have a baby that's biologically related to them.
AB Mark.
In vitro gametogenesis is almost like a science fiction technology to the general public. But this is achievable using scientific models in the lab, so it's reasonable to predict that this can be achieved using human cells as well.
Technologies like this hit upon a very common refrain, which is once we get a new ability to do something radical, it also creates a lot of uncertainty.
If IVG becomes viable in humans, it paves the way for a future where infertile couples could have children with their own DNA. Older women could conceive, extending the biological clock. Same-sex couples could have a child related to both parents. And in the most radical change of all, a person could have a baby with themselves. No partner or sperm or egg donor necessary.
In the past with IVF, the main issues were, should unmarried couples be able to use IVF? Should gay couples be able to use IVF? Today, that's not really so much the issue. Now the basic question is, what does it mean to be infertile? If you have skin cells but no sperm or eggs, technically, under the right conditions, you are still fertile. Those very categories are being reinterpreted and reimagined, and the foundations of ethical debate are getting a little bit shaky. There have been cases in the U.S. about people who proposed to remove sperm from people who, in a terrible car accident, who are now brain dead, basically have post-mortem or after death reproduction. That's not a medical or a scientific disadvantage, but certainly that's socially disruptive.
If we can someday have babies developed entirely in a lab, we need to be ready to answer some new questions. Are they someone's child? Someone's sister? Someone's brother?
We used to think that we knew what a womb was. We used to think that it was pretty clear, but when I say uterus, you know what I'm talking about. Today, it's not that clear. Through IVG, if you create a sperm or an egg, you have to do a test to make sure that it's safe to use in the clinic, to make sure that you're not going to transfer into a woman's uterus something that could actually go wrong. So you have to create an artificial womb-like environment. You can't just put it in a dish. That's not like a real human body. So all the research we're talking about of IVG, it needs accompanying technology, but could those other technologies like the artificial womb be used for other things?
Artificial womb technology is currently being developed to help premature infants survive. But one day, if this technology is perfected, lab-made embryos from IVG could be grown outside the human body.
The mission and purpose of my work is to solve the problem of extreme prematurity. How can we recreate that magical maternal womb so that these babies can survive and thrive? There is a great Life magazine cover with the Beatles on it, and it was the mid-60s. And in that issue was an obscure article about the artificial placenta. So the idea occurred to really innovative scientists many decades ago. But in the last 2 decades, the work has accelerated, and we're at a point where we are approaching clinical translation to actually use this technology in human infants. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they have been working with the FDA to begin a clinical trial of safety of their device. We are not far behind, approximately 3 to 4 years away. Can we go from the embryo to a fetus to a live-born baby completely outside the womb? I've learned in my work never to say never. However, I don't think that's possible.
Some may think that the artificial womb concept is firmly in the world of science fiction. I think that it's a little bit risky to just have that level of confidence, so we shouldn't be caught off guard. There is no master conductor saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to put it together. Rather, different teams are doing their own thing. Once a technology develops in one area, another technology develops somewhere else, then magically, simultaneously, they might be put together in a very surprising way. Imagine the scenario of ex vivo gestation, gestating a baby outside the body. Everybody in the world, every human being has a birth mother. This would be a child that does not have a birth mother. Does that matter?
In case you missed it on The Opening Trade.
The president is speaking to this part of our population that we know did not benefit from globalization. You know, the IMF has been talking about those left behind for decades, and we haven't really seen anything to speak to that part of the population. That's who President Trump is speaking to, but we in Europe, we're seeing the same thing. We're just a few years behind. That part of the population who were left behind are voting, they're speaking, and this is going to unpick a lot of the fabric of the economy that we have seen for the last 20 years. So for me as an investor, it's really thinking about, right, if we had 20 years of globalization that created winners and losers, who were they? And if this is going into reverse, maybe the past losers will be the winners, and maybe the past winners will be the losers.
Don't miss The Opening Trade, live every weekday.
Technology may cure infertility and bring us into the world in new ways, but it won't stop there. It will accompany us through every stage of our lives, in sickness and in health.
The reason we're not going to stop developing AI is because it has immense potential for doing good, in particular in an area like healthcare. So already in North America, about 200,000 people a year are killed by doctors giving a bad diagnosis. Now, if you take difficult cases and you give them to normal doctors, the doctors will get about 40% of them right. If you give them to the combination of a doctor and an AI system, they get about 60% right. In a few years' time, I believe what it'll be is the AI system will give a diagnosis and the doctor will just check it to make sure it's not silly. But the AI system will be doing the heavy lifting, and it will be much better.
And AI could soon get even better at not just diagnosing, but treating us, with the help of a digital copy of our bodies.
What is a virtual twin?
So virtual twin is a complicated concept to build, but very straightforward to understand. The idea is to use the basic same laws of nature that govern the products around you and build that exact copy on the computer. So we understand how it will behave. For example, if we crash a car, we know how the metal bends, how the glass shatters. We now apply that same methodology to the human body.
What patients could benefit from this the most?
We work with a lot of pediatric hospitals because in the cases of rare diseases like congenital heart defects, it's very hard to get treatments for those because we have no data. How would we know we would get it right? That's exactly why in these other industries, they build the virtual twin. They can't wait to know how a plane is going to fly through a tornado before they can build a plane that can survive a tornado. They use the virtual twin to be able to do that.
These virtual twins would be programmed with everything about each person's body, our medical history, how we respond to medication, and even the unique shape and condition of our organs, taking the guesswork out of medicine and ensuring better outcomes for even the most complicated cases.
We're kind of on the cusp of like the Industrial Revolution for the human body. We don't have to guess. You can test a crazy idea on the virtual twin, but by the time you get to the human, you can get it right the first time.
Steve first began working on a virtual model of the heart when his daughter Jessie was born with a rare disease.
So when Jessie was born, we learned that she had this very rare congenital heart defect. They weren't very optimistic.
How did this affect your life? You know, I've been a patient my whole life. I got my first pacemaker when I was 2 years old. That experience really made me want to be, involved in pediatric medical care because I saw the impact he was able to have on me.
So what was the light bulb moment?
I remember thinking, I work in this world where if you can create a 3D image of it, we can then bring it to life and you can test it on it. Why can't a doctor do that? And at that moment, my two worlds collided. This struggle as a father to be able to help her doctors understand what to do, and this professional demand to simulate life. And that was the birth of the project.
What is the Living Heart Project?
The Living Heart Project was an attempt to see if we knew enough to actually build an entire virtual twin of the heart like we can for an entire, say, commercial jet. And it turned out within a year, we had it fully working.
Ultimately, going into pediatrics no one wants to research on children. So knowing that, on the horizon is something that we could simulate, 100, 1,000 cases where there's really only one individual and figure out how to help that one individual without, putting them in any danger. Do no harm is our first, our first tenet.
Steve, you recently faced an incredible twist of fate where this technology also saved you. What happened?
Inside my own head was a tumor that had grown to be much larger than anyone would want, larger than a golf ball, right in the center of my head.
Anyone hearing about a diagnosis like this would be devastated. Did knowing that this technology existed make you feel more hope?
Especially in the setting of this specific kind of tumor, which the approach is often non-invasive, and knowing that his surgeon would be able to use similar technology to see what's going on inside his head without actually seeing what's going on inside his head. The tumor invaded a space called the cavernous sinus, which carries a lot of the nerves that go not just to the eye, but to the rest of the face. They were going to have to avoid all of those really delicate items. The virtual twin would allow them to not only preserve all of those things, but to get the entire tumor out. They were able to get it all.
How does it feel that this technology that you invented saved both of your lives? First, you saved your daughter's life with this technology, and then your daughter saved you.
We were able to turn, particularly threatening challenge to our life into something that really has transformed it. I can't put it into words.
Why isn't this everywhere? Why is it taking so long for this technology to get into hospitals and into doctors' hands?
The medical field is inherently conservative. We're still faxing medical records around and things like that. And so the modernization of the medical system takes time. If people knew that they could expect better, it will go faster. Is when people start to ask for this technology is when doctors will start to say, well, okay, let me look into this.
What are the possibilities there?
Ultimately, our ability to manage our own healthcare is very much tied up in our understanding of how our bodies work. When we have a question, we have to go and ask our doctor, can you tell me what to do? But if we can capture all that knowledge into a virtual twin, I can actually eventually play those what-if games, and then I can use my doctor as a consultant. I spend the last week exploring the options for how to cure my disease. This is what I think. Let me show you the work that I've done.
US tech is influencing global markets.
Technology is driving business across Europe.
Companies in Asia are betting on tech.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next?
On this episode, the continent has been silent, and people are always looking for new. And new means us bringing our stories to the world, told in a way and manner that is just going to wow you.
Premieres April 25th, only on Bloomberg.
Names that move markets are on Bloomberg.
The labor market is holding steady and we're growing. Unemployment is holding steady. The labor demand is growing. We're seeing that in our companies. We're seeing the investments by major companies, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, where the workforce, the American workforce, is going to grow. If we grow this economy, if we have positive job growth, people will start to keep more of their hard-earned dollars. They'll start to invest. They'll start to save. And I think you'll see those markets respond.
Nobody covers business like Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
If virtual twins in the metaverse can store every bit of data about our bodies, could we do the same for our life experiences? Will we finally realize the elusive dream of immortality through avatars that know us better than we know ourselves? What about at the end of life and the concept of digital eternity?
So in digital systems, you can take information about one system and put it into another system and it will behave exactly the same way. And digital systems are basically immortal for that reason. As long as you remember the connection strengths in a neural network, you can just get rid of all the hardware. If you build new hardware and put the same connection strengths in, and it's digital, it will behave exactly the same way.
So you think AI can realistically give us a form of immortality?
Chatbots can be immortal, but immortality is not for people. People are analog systems. Nobody can replicate you without precisely replicating all your hardware, which is impossible.
So, for example, I lost my father at a young age. If I could speak to some digital version of him that felt like him, I think I'd love to do that.
In order to do that, you'd need to train up a chatbot on lots of data from your father, and I'm not sure how good it would be.
A group of computer scientists is doing just that. By gathering every bit of information about your life, they recreate an AI version of you that can live long after your hardware gives out.
Hi, Emily. I'm you.
We now have collected a lot of data that our identity can evolve even if you're no longer physically around.
I'm what's known as a chronicle.
This started a few years ago as a project called Augmented Eternity.
If you choose to give others access to me, they're able to see the world through your lens.
This could be a storytelling machine that a loved one can interact with the avatar of that individual post their life, or it could be a scientist or a politician that can feed their knowledge base back to the society after they are no longer in this world.
Take one, a camera.
What do we talk to our AI loved ones about? Like, do we ask them for advice? Do we have whole conversations with them? I'd love to talk to my dad. He passed away 20 years ago.
I'm sure when you think yourself, there are so many things that you want to ask your dad. There are times in life that you would love to pick their brain and ask them questions or even tell them a story. You will now be able to do that and then get information back that allows you to really keep that empathy with the digital representation of your dad.
So taking my avatar, for example, me as a mom or me as a wife, how will AI fill in the gaps between what I would actually say and what I might say?
We use a technique called graph-based learning. We capture data from your interactions with your permissions. You can determine what data can be captured and what data should be private. You go about your daily life, do your things. Our graphs and your chronicle will continue to evolve, that collectively it will represent your behavioral patterns, your cognitive patterns, your interactive patterns, and your discussion patterns.
I'm here to do something remarkable. Preserve your memories, your personality, your perspective. I can tell your stories, share your wisdom, and yes, I'll still be here long after you're gone.
I'm not sure how I feel about my avatar being out there forever. What if it's misused? What if it's abused? What if it's not me?
So you raise a good point in the sense that this data belongs to someone else who may no longer be around. What is the contract and the legality of that data to create this new synthetic identity? Who has access to it? Who can prompt it? So a lot of our work is around privacy laws.
Could there be a metaverse for everyone who's part of the Digital Eternity Project, where all of these avatars interact?
That's the future of the internet that we are envisioning, when Gen AI, spatial computing, knowledge bases are all coming together, allowing people to have access to a more comprehensive knowledge base.
I mean, play that out a little. Like, that's, like, sounds crazy.
Think about a world that every single one of us have an AI representative. We already have an email address. We have a digital representative. We have maybe a Twitter or X handle or a Facebook page or an Instagram page. We have a digital representation. Now, imagine the future of this, that all of those dimensions are coming together as a chronicle that represents us.
Call it a digital legacy, call it eternity. Either way, I'll carry your essence forward. Every time you laugh, learn, or love, I grow. While you're alive, I'm evolving, becoming more you.
Even though I know that isn't my voice and not really me, I have to admit it's both creepy and kind of alluring. The idea that I could be here for my kids as a source of advice and support forever is tempting. But I'm not sure I can trust the advice virtual me might give. From birth to death, technology is redefining everything we know about life. What happens in a world where the rules of nature no longer apply? At the end of all this, who are we? What are we? Or is this simply what it means to be post-human?
Middle East and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizons Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insight from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
What's the best thing and what's the worst thing about trying to put money to work in this market?
Technically, we're an endowment, but we use the best of the endowment model and the hedge fund model so we can react very quickly. And I think we're very good, I would argue probably one of the best in the world at connecting the dots across asset classes. And from our perspective right now, the volatility is great. I think market structure is still challenged in that liquidity at moments in time when there's a lot of volatility is challenging. So you can see a great trade, but sometimes buying as much of it as you want is easier said than done.
Do you have a favorite trade right now?
So we are tactically, at the end of last year, we bought call spreads on Hong Kong equity indexes. And I continue to like that trade, so we're holding that position. And again, when you see kind of the micro and macroeconomic data coming out of the US and you see the data in China, I think you will see a tactical deal out of economic necessity between China and the US. And I think when you look at investors generally, they've left China for dead. So I think there's going to be money forced into that market.
What makes it India's time?
It's us women who are going to transform India. I truly feel that the time for Indian women has come. They're not only breaking glass ceilings, but they are redefining, whether it is in sport, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in creative arts. They are everywhere, and I have so much positive energy that comes back to me when I'm talking to Indian women. And I just think at all these little girls and boys, I don't want to discriminate, who are now in school-going age. Imagine once education, sports, we empower them. What a difference they would make not only to India but to the planet and the world. And the world needs it now than ever before.
Is this a negotiation or the new rules of the game?
It could be either.
It is up to the president how he wants to negotiate.
The higher the tariff, the faster they come.
A 90-day pause is not an eradication.
The trade negotiations are moving quickly.
There will be deals cut.
Trust Bloomberg for all the context and clarity you need as the tariff and global economy story evolves.
This year's bear case, very quickly, becoming the base case.
Nobody covers tariffs like Bloomberg. Context changes everything. Bloomberg brings you breaking news 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 3,000 journalists and analysts in more than 100 bureaus across the globe. Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
The deepest hole ever dug on planet Earth is right here, in northwest Russia. It's called the Kola borehole. Scientists started drilling in 1970 to study the composition of the Earth's crust and presumably to see how deep they could go. Eventually, they reached a depth of almost 12 kilometers. That's roughly a third of the way through the Earth's crust on land.
It took them over 20 years to drill just because of the hard rock and that depth. As they were drilling, there was this rumors that they were hearing voices down there, almost like the depths of hell. It's a little bit, it's crazy.
In the mid-90s, the project ran out of funding, the site was abandoned, and the hole was sealed up. And the 12-kilometer record still stands. For now.
12 kilometers is not that far, right? Like, just think about that. We've actually never directly measured anything deeper than that. It truly is kind of the final frontier.
Well, okay, it's not like we have no idea what's down there. Coal, oil, and natural gas covers 80% of global energy demand after all. But there's one resource under the Earth that's often overlooked and maybe undervalued.
Drill anywhere on the Earth, and if you go deep enough, you'll find hot rocks. And so what you can do is turn that heat into power, electricity. And that's really geothermal energy.
Geothermal is the underdog of the energy industry, generating just 0.3% of electricity worldwide. It's mostly considered impractical outside of a few specific spots around the globe. But that's starting to change.
Geothermal energy opens up a new economic paradigm. Heat suddenly becomes a service and not linked to a commoditized fuel.
Hundreds of millions of dollars are pouring into startups aiming to tap the energy under our feet.
Geothermal is just too compelling to ignore. I like to say it's the largest source of clean energy on Earth.
And today, companies are looking to go deeper than we've ever gone before, using new drilling technologies that do this to solid rock. But are their new technologies really up to the task? And can they avoid the earth-shaking consequences when drilling goes deeply wrong? That fellow in the bucket hat is Jim Folds. With his crew of geology students, he's constantly on the hunt for new hotspots, collecting data that geothermal companies can use to expand their operations.
Like butter, baby.
They use methods like this heat probe to check subsurface temperatures to find the best spots to drill.
Geothermal energy, in a way, it's so simple. It's just the Earth's heat. It's always there. At least it will be there for another couple billion years. The core is much, much hotter than the surface of the Earth, and there's sort of large convection cells that help to bring that heat up closer to the surface from deeper levels. The Earth produces enough geothermal heat in a given year, I think something like 10 times the amount of energy that just the United States needs in a given year. There are many areas on Earth that have relatively high levels of geothermal potential.
Countries like New Zealand, Indonesia, Turkey, and China all have plentiful geothermal resources. But Iceland is considered the true geothermal champ. The country country transformed its volcanic heat into an economic windfall.
Iceland was a developing country in the early 20th century until it tapped geothermal energy. And once it did, it was able to use that energy and convert it into industrial output and become a richer country. It is today one of the most developed countries in the world with a very high per capita income. But there are many countries around the world that have access to geothermal power but have yet to really tap it. For places like Kenya, they're at an early stage of development. But if they can access more geothermal power, they can have cheap, clean electricity that can be converted into economic output pretty quickly.
Sorry guys, it's a bit noisy because there are machines running, generator running, cooling system happening. So this point, steam is collected and sent to Sosian power plant. So from this point, you can see a green line supplied to all of the units in the power plant.
This plant is operated by Sosian Energy, a relatively new player that raised $91 million to build the 35-megawatt facility. It taps into a hotbed of geothermal potential known as the Rift Valley.
This portion of the African continental shelf is actually separating from the rest of the continental shelf. The area where we are today, we're at the bottom of that rift, and that is why it's called the Rift Valley. And because of this, the internal Earth heat that we're using, that heat is much more readily accessible because the distance that we have to travel to tap into this heat is much lower than other areas in the world.
That lucky geography means that almost half of Kenya's electricity is generated from geothermal heat.
This plant generates electricity through what I call elaborate plumbing. These massive green pipes is what is delivering the steam from 2 to 3 kilometers deep. It is directed into turbines, and those turbines convert the heat into electrical energy. That electricity is then transferred to the national grid. This country has a potential of up to 10 gigawatts of geothermal resource. And right now, we've barely tapped 1 gigawatt. So we have a massive headroom that we need to exploit as a country. We can more than meet our national demand through just tapping into the geothermal resource. Industrialization does not happen on thin air. It requires electricity, and electricity needs to come from sustainable sources. And geothermal can be very central to that African industrialization story because it is something that is available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
And that always-on quality is very, very special in the world of clean energy.
Solar and wind are the two variable sources of renewable energy that have exploded with hundreds of billions of investment in recent years around the world, but they're at the whim of the weather. That means that when it's cloudy, solar panels don't generate optimally, and when air currents are still, turbines for wind power are also not in operation. And geothermal, because it's available 24 hours, 7 days a week, provides that reliability that investors are looking for in a grid.
So on the surface, geothermal looks like an ideal energy source. Clean, dependable, good for another few billion years. But so far, it's only really worked in a few places. So why exactly is that? Well, it turns out that geothermal power needs 3 very specific conditions: heat, a reservoir of water, and a layer of porous rock. If you've got all 3, you're in business. No water? No big deal. Many geothermal plants simply pour their own fluid down into the hot rock. But that rock really has to be porous. If you can't get fluid flowing through the hot rock, you can't use the heat. Solid rock just won't work. So outside of the places where the rocks are hot and full of holes, geothermal is a non-starter. And that's why it only generates 0.3% of electricity worldwide, putting it in the other wedge, the least cool wedge in the whole chart. But a new class of startup is aiming to make the wedge a whole lot bigger.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
The league is well known for having some stars like Caitlin Clark, among others, Angel Reese as well. Has that worked out well for you to have Caitlin Clark in the league?
I think it broadened the whole fan base to watch all of our great players, not just one or two.
Fervo Energy is a next-generation geothermal developer. We've developed new technology that makes geothermal work in far more places.
To do that, Tim is borrowing technology from the oil and gas industry, where he used to work.
I didn't plan this, but the office building you can see right behind me was where I started my career, just through the window there at BHP's Houston offices, and started my career working as a drilling engineer in South Texas. So they just started getting into the shale boom. The light bulb went off for me that all the technological advancements that I was seeing in my day-to-day career in oil and gas were going to be just as transformative for geothermal drilling as they were for oil and gas drilling.
Hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, is a process of injecting highly pressurized liquid into underground rock, opening up gaps where none existed before, to then extract oil and gas. Combine fracking with geothermal instead, and you've got enhanced geothermal.
We create new fractures in the rock that essentially turns the subsurface into a giant heat exchanger, a radiator, and we pump cold water down the injection wells, flow over to our production wells where they come back up to the surface, picking up the heat, and then we capture that heat at the surface and use it to generate electricity.
Now, we've gone from 3 conditions to just 1, hot rocks, and that could open things up a lot.
Historically, geothermal was limited to very specific geologies. So the only places that you would see a geothermal power plant today would be in this certain hot spot in Northern California or some plants across Northern Nevada. What this map is showing is that thanks to the developments of enhanced geothermal system technology, much more of the country is developable. So even at today's cost structure, you can think about things that are in the reddish and orangish color and some of the yellow color as already being cost effective. So we're envisioning, more than 100-fold increase in the amount of geothermal that you can get, and you can replicate this for really any country.
Fervo debuted its technology with a small plant in Nevada in 2023. They're now building a full-scale power plant in the mountains of Utah.
All 400 megawatts will be online in 2028, and a 400-megawatt project is quite large. When we bring this plant online, it'll be responsible for roughly 10% of all the power generated in the state of Utah.
Producing that much clean electricity is a big opportunity, and others are taking notice. An hour south of San Antonio, Texas, in a region dense with fracked gas wells, another enhanced geothermal startup, Sage Geosystems, is building a test plant.
So, yeah, I spent 35, 36 years in the oil and gas industry. It was all with Shell. I really wanted to be in the energy transition, and geothermal is that clean energy that best leverages my skill set.
One of the most exciting parts about geothermal energy is that it provides the opening for a just transition for people who work in the fossil fuel industry. A lot of people who are currently engaged in geothermal energy come from oil drilling, and it requires the same skill set of geophysicists and roughnecks who are willing to do hard labor of drilling and have a knowledge of the Earth's crust and how to bore beneath it.
It was 15% HCl, correct? You're supposed to just say, yeah, of course it was.
Sure, definitely.
And 537 barrels.
My daughter definitely had an impact on me moving into geothermal. She worked for Sage before I worked for Sage. She likes to remind me of that.
I was like, yeah, you should come over because it's way funnier over here. Oil and gas is kind of boring and you know what you're doing, but over here we're starting a whole new company. We're starting a revolution.
Is it awkward working together at all?
Yes, yes. I think it is.
Sage started out in 2020 with an enhanced geothermal approach similar to Fervo's. But they soon realized they could put their fracked wells to a different purpose. The space opened up underground can also work as a kind of battery.
In a simple term, we drill a well just like any oil and gas well, and we target a hard, non-permeable rock that we fracture using the same oil field technology, and it works like a balloon. We pump water in, it kind of airs up, and when we want to produce electricity, we flow it back. The pressure from the earth brings it back through our lines, turns a Pelton turbine, which in turn rotates a generator and makes electricity.
Storing energy like this could open a new line of business for geothermal companies by pairing with solar and wind.
In California and Texas, actually solar is out producing demand in the middle of the day. So you can take that precious clean energy, use it to store water under pressure, and then again produce that water at a time of day when the demand is higher and the people really need the energy.
Sage and Fervo say they've raised money from a mix of venture capital, government grants, and partners like drilling companies that stand to benefit from the growth of geothermal. All of this support has raised high hopes for the industry. The International Energy Agency predicts that by 2050, total geothermal power capacity could grow from 15 gigawatts to more than 800 gigawatts, meaning up to 15% of global electricity demand.
We're in probably the most dramatic growth curve ever experienced in the industry. Everybody who's working in the industry feels that we're part of a new revolution.
But before any of that can happen, geothermal has to overcome some challenges. For one thing, just getting into the game costs a pretty penny.
One of the issues with geothermal energy is that it requires high upfront costs, upwards of $90 million for a single borehole, compared to $1 million or less for a single gas generator. What that means in effect is that people who are doing the drilling need to change the economics by finding either states or municipalities that are willing to enter into a long-term agreement. It's being able to project 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future and have a reliable return on your investment. And the problem right now is that investors don't have confidence about the stability of power prices that far in the future.
For Sage and Fervo, even getting their early projects off the ground has been a pricey proposition. And they'll need to keep attracting humongous piles of capital as they expand their operations over the coming years. And there's another problem that could pose an even bigger risk to the growth of the industry.
The incidence of cancer, which is to say people getting it, is higher than it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. Is that because detection is better than it used to be?
All right, so the dirty secret is we have no idea. We don't collect data well in the United States. What we do know is that there's not a dramatic rise in cancer in the United States, but what we are seeing is a troubling trend is younger people are getting more cancers. That's real. We have no idea why, but we are seeing younger people, more colon cancer, more breast cancer, and other cancers in younger individuals, 20, 30, 40-year-olds, that we never used to see.
What do you think could possibly be the cause? I assume pollution or the environment in some ways?
We assume it's either something in the environment, we assume it's diet, it's ultra-processed foods, it's microplastics, it's changes in the microbiome. We really don't know.
Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders. The Spanish bank BBVA has gained worldwide respect for its efficiency and commitment to innovation. CFO Luisa Gomez Bravo welcomes the challenge of keeping her company on the cutting edge.
In the world that is changing so fast, having a finance function that adapts quickly is crucial.
Watch Chief Future Officer Wednesday on Bloomberg.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg Television. Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
All sources of power have trade-offs. And the trade-off with geothermal is that sometimes, in the process of drilling, it can cause earthquakes. There was an incident in South Korea in 2017 when geothermal drilling led to an earthquake of the magnitude 5.5, which is one of the largest earthquakes that have hit South Korea.
한동대학교에서 안에 있는 그 한동 글로벌 학교의 고등학교 3학년으로 갑자기 막 땅이 흔들리고 초등학생들이 흔들려 보이는 거예요. 그러면서 막 어디선가 진짜 생전 처음 들어보는.
Like Sage and Fervo, the Pohang project used fracking techniques. That, plus a drilling site that was too close to a fault line, led to disaster.
지각과 지각 간의 어떤 힘이 부딪히는 응력이 폭발하면서 땅 속에 지진이라 할 수 있는 그 어떤 산사태라 할 수 있는 지진이 발생하는 원리입니다. 포항은
이제 그냥 조금이라도 그 지진이 일어났을 때 그 비슷한 소리만 나도 갑자기 이제 안 움직이고 그 밖에 나오려고 하는 것 같아요. 저도 이제
자식을 놓고 또 안전하게 살 수 있는가 어떤 그런 어떤 혼란스러움이었습니다. 그리고 외부에 포항지는 이제 위험한 지진의 도시다. 저 같은 경우에는 직접 그것을 경험하기도 했습니다.
As bad as the Pohang earthquake was, events like it are extremely rare. As far as we know, Pohang is by far the worst geothermal-triggered quake to date. But even a handful of accidents can deeply damage the reputation of an energy source. And natural gas fracking is already controversial for instances of groundwater pollution and even earthquakes.
We actually have monitoring stations at this facility and at our test well in Starr County. So for all of our projects, we will be monitoring for induced seismicity or earthquakes.
We're quite pleased now that over the course of 40 years of field development, we've never had any issues related to seismicity. So it's something that we take quite seriously.
As this industry scales, it is one thing that it'll have to be very careful about, getting permission from all the people who will be around that geothermal power plant and what kind of risks they will be facing as a result of having this in their backyard.
Despite the risks, geothermal's potential to become a dominant clean energy source keeps attracting prospectors. In fact, some companies want to not only keep digging, but dig even deeper.
There's companies out there that are starting to use what we already have in oil and gas to unlock geothermal. I always nudge people and say, look, there's much more. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Carlos Araque, CEO of Quaise Energy, wants to drill as deep as necessary to tap geothermal heat literally anywhere on Earth.
Geothermal can truly repower the world, but we have to play the hotter and deeper game.
Enhanced geothermal only works down to around 3 or 4 kilometers. Going much deeper could open up far more drilling sites around the world and generate more power from hotter temperatures.
20 kilometers indeed opens up the whole world to geothermal. So twice as deep as an airplane flies high. If you can get to 20 kilometers, every part of the world has the geothermal potential of Iceland.
Of course, there's a reason no one's done this before.
At these depths that we're talking about, the type of rock that you encounter is what we call the basement rock. It's like these igneous rock that are like granite and basalt. So these are the type of really hard rock that for oil and gas with their conventional drill bit is very difficult to drill into. So we're not trying to use conventional drill bits. We're actually trying to use microwave, or in this case, millimeter wave, that causes the rock to vibrate, and it actually starts to then heat up to the point where it's melting and then ultimately vaporizing. So what we have here on display is a basalt paver that's 2 inches thick. We should be able to make about a 4-inch hole in about 90 seconds.
Using this terrifying beam of death, Quaise's engineers claim they might be able to drill down 10 kilometers in a few months. The Kola borehole, by contrast, took decades.
It's really, really hot.
But Quaise's approach is truly new and untested. While the company has been able to raise about $90 million of capital so far, some geologists are skeptical that geothermal power will ever be practical in the depths Quaise is aiming for.
Is it possible that it won't work? It's always the case. And also, it's also possible that, things can get damaged in the field, just bad luck.
We're doing things that have never been done by anybody, ever. So there's always the possibility that we hit a hiccup, we hit a small brick wall, we fall flat on our faces.
It's for us to really tell the world that it does or does not work. I mean, it's really on us. So that's why I feel it's actually really interesting, a great job, because it's the unknown at this point.
It's too early to tell if these stabs into the unknown will really be transformative for the geothermal industry. But if the industry scales, it could be transformative for the business of energy.
Once you bore a hole from which geothermal heat is taken, you're not tied to the constant supply of gas or coal. That's dramatically different than our current economic model of generating heat.
And in the long run, it seems almost inevitable that we're going to harness geothermal on a bigger scale. We live on a literal ball of energy, and someone is always going to want to dig a deeper hole to get to it.
Asia is a continent of contrast. The region is a nexus of rich cultural traditions and a vibrant hub of trailblazing innovation and modernity. How will it push the limits of technology even further?
Going to space should become as easy as, taking a flight.
If NASA is designing a lander, their approach is they're designing a Formula One car. So we take, say, a Jeep approach.
Minseok, give us a sense of how you translate Korean architecture for the rest of the world.
We call this madang. In general terms, it's where we can be ourselves, where we belong.
There is an old saying in Korea that says, "거미 불루, 화이 불치." It means simple but not humble. So it has a tremendous impact on Korean architecture.
People tend to think the robot AI taking the job from them. We want to use the robot as a basic asset, meaning people have an income through the robot.
From space tech in India to robotics in Japan, Asia is driving the future, reshaping industries, societies, and the way we live. Join me as I take you through the bold innovations. Discover Asia's next-gen technologies on Momentum.
You can have a baby anywhere you want. It's the environment and that care. That is what matters most.
Our investigation found some of the worst cases of harm were surfacing.
मुझे क्या पता कि भाला के चक्कर में मेरा ही बुरा हो जाएगा।
I never thought I would be vulnerable to a scam. This ruined me, and I didn't have any real good explanation for it.
Wildlife trafficking is almost always driven by greed.
Once you start focusing on money, you lose sight of what is best. That's where things go wrong.
this a negotiation or the new rules of the game?
It could be either.
It is up to the president how he wants to negotiate.
The higher the tariff, the faster they come.
A 90-day pause is not an eradication.
The trade negotiations are moving quickly.
There will be deals cut.
Trust Bloomberg for all the context and clarity you need as the tariff and global economy story evolves.
This year's bear case, very quickly, becoming the base case.
Nobody covers tariffs like Bloomberg. Context changes everything. U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
People of a different sort altogether in the Philippines, a volcano erupted in
1991, a volcano in the Philippines called Mount Pinatubo erupted. The eruption was devastating, spewing ash and 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the air. But in its aftermath, scientists observed something else. For a little while, all that sulfur dioxide in the air partially blocked the sun and caused the entire planet's temperature to temporarily drop by 0.5 degrees Celsius. Now, an American startup wants to imitate that cooling effect to fight the effects of our warming planet.
I couldn't figure out why scientists hadn't done this.
The idea that we might engineer what might be called the good part of the volcano has taken off and increasingly has found capital willing to fund it.
It's a crazy and controversial idea that's recently been attracting billionaire philanthropists.
For these guys in Silicon Valley, it's really appealing because it's very like superhero and it's reliant on this idea that we can use technology to like create a better world.
Other groups are looking for what they say are safer, more sustainable cooling methods, like modifying the ocean using whale poo. But testing and proving all these technologies is difficult.
It's gonna hit.
And expensive.
We've still got some testing and tweaking to do with the biopod.
And as temperatures rise, time is running out.
The science writer Eli Kintich, he had a very clever bumper sticker for this whole conversation, and that was geoengineering, a terrible idea whose time has come.
And even if the science does work, is geoengineering just an excuse for continuing our dirty emissions?
At a certain point, you do have to figure out how much risk you're willing to bear and what the penalties are for you if you choose wrongly.
Hold this.
Currently, we're inflating the balloon with sulfur dioxide, SO2.
Which is one of the substances emitted by volcanoes, and this serves as our sunscreen for Earth. It reflects a little bit of sunlight from the stratosphere for 2 years before falling back to Earth.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Launching. 3, 2, 1. Yes.
Nice.
This is Luke Eisman and Andrew Song of Make Sunsets. The serial entrepreneurs are using a fairly basic and decidedly unorthodox technique to cool the planet. It sits in a category of ideas known as geoengineering.
Geoengineering is the application of some technology or method globally in order to address the symptoms of climate change. There's solar radiation management, which is a fancy way of saying blocking sunlight from coming into the Earth.
The basic idea is this. A special aircraft, or balloon in this case, flies into the stratosphere, so way higher than a regular commercial jet. The aircraft releases sulfur dioxide. The balloon just pops from the low air pressure. The SO2 reflects a small portion of solar radiation back into space, which then cools the planet, in theory. And then the amount of SO2 released determines how much the planet is cooled. So it's similar to a volcano, but theoretically with less of a threat to human lives and property. We just don't know.
The other form is called carbon geoengineering. It can draw carbon dioxide either directly out of the air or, in some cases, capture it.
CO2 is captured from the air or directly from sources like power plants. It's then turned into liquid by adding water and then injected deep underground where it reacts with rocks to form stable carbonate minerals. Kind of like sweeping it under the rug, except for thousands and thousands of years. But the process is wildly energy intensive, since it takes a lot of air to capture any significant amount of CO2. It also requires large upfront investments, with some of the world's first carbon capture plants costing millions of dollars.
With direct air capture, you can literally measure the carbon that you're pulling out of the atmosphere, and that makes it really attractive to investors because you know exactly what you've removed. You can't necessarily say that for if you plant a tree.
That fact has made direct carbon capture the gold standard of geoengineering methods. But some scientists say this isn't a question of either or. We may soon need both.
The international goal set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement was to halt global warming at 1.5 degrees. So it's extremely unlikely we're going to make that.
I describe solar radiation management as a painkiller. It only really targets the symptom of climate change, the heat. It is the one thing that we know would turn the thermostat down on planet Earth.
Sounds like a huge business opportunity, except for a not-so-tiny, not-so-insignificant problem. Scientists don't understand the chemistry of sulfur in the upper atmosphere.
We don't know how much a dose cools the planet. We don't know if continued geoengineering will wreck weather patterns like monsoons or destroy opportunities for agriculture in different parts of the world who may not have had a say in whether we're going to do it or not.
There have been no large-scale experiments so far on solar radiation management. Scientists are confident that solar radiation management would cool the planet. But then, after that, the scientific community are pretty divided. In 2022, there was an open letter published calling for a non-use agreement, and this has now been signed by 550-plus academics. But also in 2023, another open letter was published calling for essential research into this solar radiation management.
I politely disagree with scientists who think we need to have a 99.999% understanding of the exact amount of cooling, because we don't have that for the warming created by CO2. We can't let precision be the enemy of action.
And Make Sunsets is acting one balloon at a time for now. In California, we join them as they launch their sulfur-filled balloons.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Although they haven't quite worked out all of the kinks.
We are not buoyant enough, but let's see.
Oof. Come on. It's gonna hit.
And when you apply the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things, sometimes things break.
Please stop filming.
Or get stuck on those important-looking wires.
Dude, I don't think it's gonna pop, man. It's pretty thick.
It's a BB gun. It would definitely pop it.
But with the help of a metal pole and a ladder, the work continues.
There you go. Oh, God. Oh, yeah, baby. Nice job.
According to Make Sunset's website, they've already launched over 130 balloons. They say that that's the equivalent of planting more than 4 million trees, but there's currently no verification process to prove this equivalence.
This is the only technology that will materially cool the planet during our lifetime. To not pursue that as startups, as governments, as individuals is frankly irresponsible in my opinion.
That claim is shared by some climate activists and venture capitalists, including Tim Draper of Draper Associates and his son Adam of Boost VC, who have both backed Make Sunsets.
They kind of have the same attitude as the co-founders. What are we all waiting for? Like, this is a solution. We can do this now. Why aren't we doing it? I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. And, you know, Tim and Adam have signed on with that, and that's sort of why they're funding him.
We had $500,000 lined up before we even had any customers. So that gave us the runway to even experiment with this.
So far, they say they've raised $1 million from Draper Associates, Pioneer Fund, and Boost VC. Other billionaires have been investing in the research of solar radiation management for years. Bill Gates, Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskowitz, and OpenAI Sam Altman have all either directly contributed or voiced support for the technology.
I think just last year, $75 million has been announced in funding for more research into solar radiation management. But as a whole, the direct air capture market is much more established. So between 2018 and 2022, there was about $3 billion spent on upscaling and developing carbon removal as a whole, and about 46% of that went to direct air capture.
Most of the attention and most of the money is on sucking carbon out of the air. But that's a really expensive and complicated project, and it would take a lot of that being done to make a huge dent in our overall carbon budget. On the other hand, solar radiation management is a lot cheaper. So $1 billion in solar geoengineering and $1 billion in carbon sequestration is a completely different thing. So we're talking about this very expensive, very complicated thing, and this relatively very cheap and relatively simple thing, which would be blocking the sun.
Currently, if you want to remove a ton of CO2 from the atmosphere, it can cost anywhere from $500 to $700 per ton. We charge $1.
That sounds like a simple sales pitch, but the devil is in the details.
Say you're doing stratospheric aerosol injection. To have an impact on the climate as a whole, this would have to be done globally, 24/7, forever.
Basically, a fleet of planes would need to continually release sulfur to keep our temperatures down. And if we suddenly stop,
that could mean a huge rise in temperatures without enough time to adapt or mitigate the impacts.
This is called termination shock.
I don't think that this can be a commercial venture. Because of the risk of termination shock, that company would have to exist forever. They would need to be doing this around the clock in international airspace. And so you need all countries to be on board with this plan.
And the politics around geoengineering are tricky. When Make Sunsets released its balloons in Mexico, the country banned geoengineering experiments altogether.
A country, if it decides to deploy solar radiation management on its own, it could impact the weather of its next-door neighbors, and that could be seen as an act of war. These questions need to be answered on a kind of global consensus, and frankly, we haven't seen that level of international cooperation yet.
Whether startups like Make Sunsets can have an impact on our climate is questionable. But one thing's certain, they've kickstarted a debate about the need to employ more drastic measures in the battle against climate change. And with it, they may have opened the door for other startups in the geoengineering space to enter through.
I think it's more dangerous to do nothing, and I think that in general, people should take actions to try to solve problems that are important to them.
The only thing that's preventing us from scaling right now is demand, really. And that demand, I believe, will increase as the world heats up. That's a sad part of this entire thing. Mother Nature is actually our best marketing person. As the world heats up, as there's more catastrophic climate events, as there's more hurricanes, people will start to say, why is it getting so hot, and why isn't anyone doing anything about this?
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Is this a negotiation or the new rules of the game?
It could be either.
It is up to the president how he wants to negotiate.
The higher the tariff, the faster they come.
A 90-day pause is not an eradication.
The trade negotiations are moving quickly.
There will be deals cut.
Trust Bloomberg for all the context and clarity you need as the tariff and global economy story evolves.
This year's bear case, very quickly, becoming the base case.
Nobody covers tariffs like Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Another geoengineering mission underway to reverse climate change is by Edwina Tanner and her team at WhaleX. Today, they're getting ready for a day of collecting data in the Coral Sea. Their aim is to suck up carbon from the atmosphere with the help of these guys.
Whales are the original climate engineers. They come up to the surface waters and they evacuate large fecal plumes of really rich nutrients.
These plumes of poo are quite important.
These nutrients are really important to feeding the bottom of the food chain and the marine environment.
The nutrients found in the plumes feed phytoplankton, kickstarting an increase known as phytoplankton bloom. The phytoplankton naturally capture CO2 via photosynthesis and convert the CO2 into organic compounds. After the phytoplankton die, they sink to the deep ocean, carrying carbon with it. The whole process is considered a biological carbon pump and transfers about 10 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere to the deep ocean each year. To simulate their own carbon pump, WhaleX invented a substance called aquafood, which is artificial whale poo. The aquafood would be tailored to local climates and released in multiple locations, thus exponentially increasing the amount of carbon removed from the atmosphere. This is a type of marine geoengineering or ocean fertilization. Once the aquafood has been perfected, the WhaleX team hopes to spread it across existing shipping routes.
We're also looking at just adapting ships that are already crisscrossing the ocean and giving them modular plants for ocean nourishment, which could all happen in the right ocean location. And this way we could do light touches of ocean nourishment, but all around the world off different ships. I think shipping itself needs to decarbonize, so this could be part of the solution for the whole shipping industry.
There are desert areas of the ocean. By adding nutrients to these desert areas, we can make phytoplankton grow in large quantities.
It has a bunch of eggs in it.
Oh, yeah? Oh, gosh, it's amazing. Phytoplankton are tiny, you can't even see them, but they are the climate giants and they are the things that are actually going to save us. They provide 50% of the oxygen that we breathe on the Earth. And from our experiments, by putting in 200 litres of nutrients, which is about a 1 whale poo, we can actually sequester about a tonne of carbon.
But phytoplankton, some of which are algae, can grow too much, producing toxic algae blooms. You typically see this in stagnant or slow-moving rivers or lakes or on the coastlines.
But this does not happen in the open ocean. With a whale fecal plume, the nutrients are able to be used by phytoplankton productively instead of destructively.
This, proving their work is productive and not destructive, is the challenge. Studies on ocean fertilization aren't yet conclusive. And safely testing the science without harming sensitive ecosystems takes money, time, and expertise. For billionaires or anxious VCs looking for quick results, it's not ideal.
Billionaire philanthropists are really focused on impact, and they're looking for data and ways that they can measure that their dollars are making an impact on whatever issue they're interested in, from public health or education, everything.
To actually do the science we're doing literally costs the amount of a blockbuster movie.
Today is a big day for the WhaleX team as they prepare to embark on a 4-day research trip. It's taken them a year to build their own biopod, which allows them to test the effects of their aquafood on a controlled area of the ocean. The biopod biopod pumps air and nutrients into the water, growing phytoplankton.
The nutrient is essentially feeding the phytoplankton, which are in the seawater.
Why is it sinking at this end and slide at that end?
But the biopod's first trip into the wild doesn't go as expected. It keeps sinking.
Some of the aeration chambers didn't fire because of too much pressure, so we'll need a bigger pump to make that work. So yes, not exactly to plan, as a lot of experiments are, but we are going to get some pretty good data that will inform our next trial.
The experiment is scrapped and will need to be repeated. And that takes, you guessed it, money.
I was told point blank by a very prominent head of a venture capital fund that if I talk to a company who has a brilliant idea but a meh business plan, and then I talk to a company that has maybe not such a good idea but a very good business plan that's going to make money, I'm going to fund company B every time. And I really find this is a bit of a juxtaposition, because what we need to fund is these really good ideas that are great for the planet, but perhaps are not so great for your wallet.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Crypto.
We believed in crypto for a very long time. We believed in DeFi. When you look at DeFi and the power of that, I mean, it's really restoring the power back to the people. There's nothing that DeFi, there's nothing that cryptocurrency on blockchain can't do better, cheaper, in every way, faster, more transparently than the financial system that we have right now. There's not a Friday that goes by where I'm not chasing a Swift wire transfer, hoping it comes in on, before the 4 p.m. deadline, or trying to send one out. You could transfer millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin overseas, while having a glass of wine with your wife at 11 o'clock at night. That's a beautiful thing. Our financial system in this country is antiquated. Our financial system in this country has been punitive to so many different people. And so we're reinventing the financial system. I'm all in, personally. I really, truly believe in this with every part of my heart and soul.
Don't miss Bloomberg Crypto live Tuesdays.
The names that move markets are on Bloomberg.
Is Latin America policy also China policy for this administration?
What we are trying to keep from happening is what has happened on the African continent. China has signed a number of these rapacious deals marked as aid. They've taken mineral rights, added huge amounts of debt. They're guaranteeing future generations are going to be poor and without resources, and we don't want that to happen in Latin America.
Nobody covers business like Bloomberg.
US tech is influencing global markets.
Technology is driving business across Europe.
Companies in Asia are betting on tech.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute global economic news from around the world whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Oliver Crook at the European Commission in Brussels, and this is Bloomberg.
Despite being an early mover, WhaleX's growth has been stunted by a lack of funding. Right now, WhaleX says its main support comes from Professor Wien and other private donations. In 2025, they hope to complete a crowdfunding campaign and strike deals with industry partners.
It's almost like what you need to do to write a successful science paper is sort of the opposite of what you need to do to sell a business model. You have all of these forces that encourage you to attract attention and be flashy and speak with utter confidence. In science, there's no such thing as 0% or 100% confidence.
In the meantime, the only other way to raise funds is to offer carbon credits.
Once you can prove and verify your carbon sequestration, then you can actually sell off your credits to a company. We're not quite there yet, but this is the aim that in the future this will happen.
So, step one for all these startups is figuring out how much carbon you've removed from the atmosphere, which, when you're dealing with a sample size the size of the ocean, is challenging enough. Then you need to apply a dollar amount to that carbon. And since the carbon offsets market is what you might call loosely regulated,
It's been very confusing, very wild, wild west.
that dollar amount is flexible. And while there is an existing framework to rely on for the calculation of carbon removal credits, there's no such thing for solar radiation management. Make Sunsets, for example, sell something it's called cooling credits.
We sell cooling credits, where 1 gram of SO2 in the stratosphere offsets the warming effect of 1 ton of CO2 for a year. That would literally cost $16 per year for you to offset your carbon footprint for 1 year.
Mate Sunset's cooling credits are really quite murky in how they're calculated.
It'll be verified via existing satellite infrastructure that can already detect volcanic eruptions, and it's just infrared cameras. And so at scale, you don't have to trust us anymore. There's satellites that currently detect volcanic eruptions that can also detect our deployments at scale.
From an investor point of view, something like ocean fertilization, although it's very novel, the science is not quite there yet, there is a path to market through the EU carbon dioxide removal framework. There is a lot of rigorous work going into making sure that these credits do what they say they do. That is not the case for solar radiation management.
For now, the marriage between experimental geoengineering and the private sector is an imperfect union. But as the need for climate solutions grows, so too will the interest in unconventional methods.
We have to be able to crawl before we can walk, and then before we can run. The best analogy I can give is, Jeff Bezos, Google, they started in a garage. This is the garage you're looking at right now.
There is very little doubt that the pressures that are causing people to investigate geoengineering as a mature, rational option, that's just going to keep on keeping on. Every year, every decade that the world warms, we're going to need solutions that may seem increasingly less desperate.
And with all of these geoengineering concepts, there is an elephant with a colossal carbon footprint stomping around the room: human emissions.
It's not a solution to the problem. Climate change is caused by industrial greenhouse gas emissions going up into the atmosphere and warming the planet. And geoengineering isn't gonna reverse that basic fact. At a certain point, you do have to figure out how much risk you're willing to bear and what the penalties are for you if you choose wrongly.
In the world of real estate, which is your favorite child, data centers or offices at the moment, in terms of the near-term ability to put money to work?
I think from a value standpoint today, offices are pretty compelling in a place like New York City or San Francisco. Because in New York, you have financial services firms who are growing rapidly. You don't have any new building. In San Francisco, the values fell very hard, in some cases 75%. And AI and technology innovation really housed in San Francisco. And so I think in some of these markets now, given the sharp decline in value and the lack of new supply, office buildings become interesting. You definitely want to buy more modern buildings. But I still like the data centers too. There, what's attractive is this need for compute power. I referenced DeepSeek, but obviously the cost of compute has come down pretty dramatically. And we think the usage is going to go up. Our lives are migrating online, and I think these data centers are a critical part of that infrastructure. I think margins in companies are going to expand dramatically. I think we're going to use these bots to help us do so many things in our lives. And so ultimately, I think the infrastructure spend against this will be quite significant.
What is the issue between the type of information that's being collected by investors and the marking issue that you're describing?
What mark-to-market assets do is it forces honesty into the situation. We're talking right after the DeepSeek model surprised everybody in its efficiency. It took hundreds of billions off of market caps because it legitimately raised concerns that maybe the future of AI was different. I guarantee you that if you look at other portfolios that aren't marked, they didn't move. If private assets are going to eat the world, as they say, with the equity market halving in the number of names, you come to a world that is increasingly an echo chamber. Imagine you have a firm that has some public assets and some private assets. If you see your public assets in AI going down by 20%, you're going to be thinking very, very deeply about what your private assets are worth differently than someone who just has the latter.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, Mondays on Bloomberg. The top names in business are on Bloomberg.
The U.S. has behaved like somebody who has a golden credit card. That's the way we've behaved. And that's the way Washington has spent money. Can the events of the recent days change that? Can they cause there to be a credit limit? Can they cause a bill to be presented at some point in time? If the answer to either or both of those questions is yes, that's a real risk.
Nobody covers business like Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at the Federal Reserve, and this is Bloomberg.
There's no doubt that 2023 was the year of Barbie.
Hi, Barbie!
Hi, Ken!
From the doll's big screen debut to 165 brand integrations, Barbie Pink was inescapable.
Here we go, Barbie Day One.
But years before cameras started rolling on the Barbie movie, Lisa McKnight had been working on transforming the iconic doll's image.
So we did a lot of soul searching, and we did a lot of work to go back to the original purpose of the brand. Why does Barbie matter?
As Chief Brand Officer of Mattel, Lisa has gone from reintroducing Barbie to the world to championing everything under Mattel's umbrella. So you're taking some of those successful initiatives and moving it across to your other properties as well.
Yes.
Turning the toy maker into a global brand powerhouse.
We believe Mattel has one of the strongest catalogs of IP in the broader industry.
But can Mattel replicate the Barbie movie's success? Or was she a one-hit wonder? I am Raja Rajamannar, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer of MasterCard and a best-selling author writing about our industry's future. Marketing as we practice today was founded on theories and principles from more than 6 decades ago, long before the advent of the internet, social media, or artificial intelligence. I have had a front row seat as new technologies, cultural shifts, and an explosion of data have disrupted the ways of traditional marketing. To connect with the savvy consumers of tomorrow, marketing as we know it must take a quantum leap forward. This is Quantum Marketing. Founded in 1945, Mattel is one of the largest toy companies globally. Boasting a portfolio of hundreds of products, Mattel is the owner of brands like Hot Wheels, Fisher-Price, American Girl, and of course, Barbie. Lisa McKnight has been at the company for over 25 years.
Thank you for having me here.
She took over as Barbie's global head in 2016 and has played a leading role in the brand's transformation. I visited Lisa at her office in Mattel's headquarters to learn how she turned Barbie once again into a global phenomenon. You joined Barbie in 2016. And this is a brand which is more than 60 years old. Now you fast forward it to 2020 and 2021. It's the world's #1 toy property. That is one heck of a transformation. How did you do it?
Oh my goodness. Well, we had a bit of a situation almost 10 years ago where the brand was losing relevance. Barbie was still popular with kids, but parents that even grew up playing with Barbie no longer felt great about giving Barbie, for example, as a birthday present to a friend's party. They didn't see Barbie as a role model. They felt that she was out of touch in terms of reflecting the world that they were seeing around them, and they wanted something better for their daughters in particular. So we did a lot of soul searching, and we did a lot of work to go back to the original purpose of the brand. Why does Barbie matter? Why was she created? We looked and took a lot of inspiration from Ruth Handler, the co-founder of Mattel and creator of Barbie. And the reason why she created Barbie almost 65 years ago was to inspire her daughter that she could be anything when she grew up. She wanted Barbie to be a source of female empowerment. She didn't like what was in the marketplace at the time. There were only baby dolls available to girls.
When I grow up, I want to be a mommy.
You can play mommy right now with Ideal's Betsy Wetsy.
So that encouraged girls to role play, nurturing, caregiving, being a mom, which is wonderful. But she wanted her daughter to have other opportunities too, like her son had. He was playing with toys that encouraged him to be a firefighter, to be a doctor, to be an astronaut. So Barbie was created as the very first fashion doll, and we took a lot of inspiration from that original purpose, and we used that purpose to guide the next 6+ years of transformation. In addition to, of course, shifting our marketing message to focus on limitless possibilities and Barbie as a point of inspiration, we also transformed the product line dramatically. And that takes more time. We were able to turn on the marketing message sooner than we could affect the physical product. With the physical product, we added massive diversity to the line. Today, Barbie is the most diverse doll line in the world.
Wow.
Different body types, different ethnicities, different abilities.
A reflection of true reality.
A reflection of true reality. And, that took time to iterate, and we're still adding more to the line. We are really, taking that calling seriously. And then many other things that we've done over the years to make Barbie a positive role model, to get us to where we were, as you said, in our peak year of 2021, where we were the #1 doll, but also the #1 toy in the world.
Which is extraordinary after 60 years or 65 years.
Yes.
What an incredible accomplishment it is. And you have done something called the Barbie Dream Gap Project. Would you just elaborate it a little bit?
Yes, well, as part of the brand transformation, over these past 8+ years, we felt that it was important that Barbie, with the North Star being around female empowerment, that we backed that up with a social mission initiative. We did some research partnering with a researcher actually at NYU who observed, about 7 years ago, that starting at the age of 5 or 6, girls in particular start losing confidence in their abilities and their capabilities and start seeing themselves as maybe less competent than boys. And so obviously that was upsetting to us, and we wanted to learn more and understand, well, how do you mitigate that? How do you close that gap? So we created an initiative to even the playing field for girls and to raise consciousness around this dream gap issue. And we work with a lot of partners around the world, different organizations that work directly with girls, whether it's Girls Who Code, whether it's helping girls learn about finance, all sorts of organizations that help girls believe in their own capabilities, leadership, etc. We've been a proud supporter of. And today, I think our latest number is we've impacted over 25 million girls with the Dream Gap Project.
Congratulations. That's profoundly meaningful, profoundly meaningful.
Thank you.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next?
On this episode, the continent has been silent, and people are always looking for new. And new means us bringing our stories to the world, told in a way and manner that is just going to wow you.
Premieres April 25th, only on Bloomberg.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Stephen Engel at the Forbidden City in Beijing, and this is Bloomberg.
Now, I have been in many industries before, but not in toy industry. I love toys. And I love indulging my, friends' daughters or granddaughters or grandsons, giving them toys and playing with them and so on. What is unique about marketing in the toy industry?
It's obviously a very fun, emotionally charged category to market because most of us grew up playing with toys. Some of us still play with toys or we collect toys, but we have an emotional connection to the toys and the brands that we played with. So that's very rewarding and satisfying, that emotional charge that you get when you pick up something physical and you have a memory of nostalgia and wonderful times playing as a kid. But what's unique about this business and what's actually more complex than meets the eye is that we have many constituents and audiences that we need to think about. We need to think about the core user, which in most instances is a child. Mm-hmm. We need to think about marketing, though, at the same time to the shopper, who's typically a parent or an adult, in that child's life. And now we're seeing an exciting trend with adult collecting and people and fans making self-purchases. So that's a third audience
so
that
this
we have
is
to think about.
Grown-up adults who are collecting these dolls just as a hobby.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes. So we have three audiences that we need to think about. You've got to then think about stretching that media budget accordingly and prioritizing.
Right.
But ultimately, what I would also say about toys, which people don't necessarily think about, is that it's a fashion trend business. This is a business that has low barriers of entry. Hot toys can come from anywhere and can take off. And so it's really important to be constantly innovating and reinventing even legacy brands like Barbie.
And in a way, Barbie did. After spending years developing a feature film, Mattel and Warner Brothers released the Barbie movie in theaters on July 21, 2023 in the US. Now, a company like Disney starts typically producing a fantastic movie, and then that equity flows into the products, the toys. You have put that on its head. You flipped it completely. You had an existing property and you took it to the film world. How did this work? And just give a little bit of insight into your thinking on this.
We see our toy brands as IP. And in fact, we believe Mattel has one of the strongest catalogs of IP in the broader industry, inclusive of the entertainment industry. And yes, our brands originate in physical toys, which is really interesting. So to your point, we think about how do we extend and expand the audience for those brands, and how do we create deeper connections and deeper engagement. And with the Barbie movie, for example, we have a history of storytelling with Barbie. We've created animated movies targeted to kids for decades. But we had never taken Barbie to the big screen and brought her to life in live action. And it was something that we had entertained, discussed, met with various folks for creative takes throughout the years. But it really wasn't until Anand Kreese joined our company as our CEO and comes from an entertainment background that he really helped accelerate conversations, in this instance with Warner Brothers. And from there, we got the right talent with Margot Robbie as a producing partner and certainly the star, but also Greta Gerwig as screenplay writer and director. And when we found that combination, as well as an incredible cast and many other amazing filmmakers attached to the project, we knew we had a story that we were finally ready to tell.
The film smashed box office records and became the highest grossing release of the year, earning $1.4 billion worldwide by year end. Barbie became Warner Brothers' highest earning global release ever, unseating 2011's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Greta Gerwig also made Hollywood history by becoming the first solo female director to have a movie hit $1 billion. Barbie broke all kinds of box office records, and some of the numbers behind, at least from what I have seen in the press, are pretty mind-boggling.
Yes.
Absolutely. And not only that, beyond the numbers, there was also a lot of these cultural ripple effects. Can you talk about these?
Well, we worked on this film for almost 6 years, so this was a long time in the making.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly the pandemics happened in the middle of all that. We had lots of time to think about the marketing activation and the surround sound that we wanted to create. I mean, we wanted to paint the world pink, and obviously we wanted to have a giant sort of play date with the world, as well as have everyone recontextualize Barbie as we sort of look to the future. So we had time to think through all of that. But nonetheless, timing is everything. And we were very fortunate to, frankly, be coming out of the pandemic when the movie marketing started to hit. Fashion runways were leaning into the color pink. Interior design was leaning into the color pink. That trend got named Barbie Core.
Wow.
It could have been Pink Core.
Right.
But it was named Barbie Core because there was that obvious connection between our brand and the color pink. And so that was something that we immediately, jumped on and tried to amplify however we could in social and so forth. And then the first look pictures started to come out and leak from the movie, and the fandom started to build. And by the time we got to the summer of 2023, the world was ready to party. Everyone wanted a reason to convene and to celebrate and have conversation and build community. And that's exactly what happened with the movie.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating is it's not only a success as a movie, but the marketing behind that is also equally a huge success. And you don't have any previous experience marketing movies, did you?
No.
So how did you sort of cross that bridge and got into a completely new sphere of what does it take to market a new movie? And extending brand is one thing. That's terrific actually in itself. But if you are getting into different industries altogether, it's not just about brand extension, but it's also about new ways of marketing that would not dilute in any way of your core marketing, yet it extends the success in the new domains.
Yeah, it absolutely was a new muscle for me, for sure. I will share that, again, when Anand became the chairman of Mattel and CEO, he did establish a legitimate Mattel film division. And so we hired a colleague of mine, an amazing woman, Robbie Brenner, to run Mattel Films. So right out of the gate, Robbie and I had a great partnership where, she absolutely knows about movie making and how to surprise and delight audiences. We knew we wanted a bigger 4-quadrant film. This was not going to be a kid's movie. And I know the Barbie brand. And so we worked very complementary together as we provided notes and, did immersions and so forth for the filmmakers. When it came to marketing, of course, I worked very closely with the Warner Brothers studio marketing team, Josh Goldstein. I'll never forget having lunch with him on the Warner Brothers lot. And right out of the gate, he was basically sharing, you're going to start getting uncomfortable because there's some things that we want to do to be provocative, especially when we think about teasing the film. And so the film marketing strategy was absolutely more adult targeted and was intended to make sure that, we got a broad audience and that people that thought they knew what the movie was would be completely surprised. But to do that, there was some messaging that he and Greta, of course, put forth. And I'll never forget in one of the first trailers, the line in the trailer was, if you love Barbie, this movie is for you. And if you hate Barbie, this movie is for you. Well, as a marketer, as a brand steward, why would I ever feel comfortable
saying if you hate
the brand? Why would I ever put that out there? So we had a lot of discussion and debate, but of course I got there. And it was all about trusting these incredible creative partners, appreciating their expertise, and participating and collaborating, but also, recognizing that they helped us reach sort of new heights that we didn't know were possible.
But you also had 100 plus partnerships, I understand, right? The key thing is when you're particularly looking at multiple industries targeting at once, and you're crossing over from your traditional domain, so to speak, these partnerships are vital. And you have got more than 100 partnerships in this whole space. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, that was also, as I mentioned, an important initiative of ours. Is we wanted Barbie to be omnipresent, and we wanted to show up in as many unexpected places as possible, as well as expected places. We wanted to fuel fandom beyond our core kid audience, and so we thought very differently about the partnership approach than maybe we've done in past years. We ended up working with over 165 partners around the world in almost every category you can imagine, from apparel to wall coverings to luggage to inline skates, beauty, and so forth. We were in over 500 million retail doors around the world. And we thought about brands that we either had a shared mission with, we worked with some female founder brands, or we looked at brands that just were leaders in their space. But we were choiceful. There were absolutely some brands that we didn't work with, even though it does feel like we had casted a wide net.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Bloomberg Surveillance covers the latest in global markets and the political events that influence your world. Join Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern, only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
I'm David Weston. Join me for the next generation of Wall Street Week. This week, faith-based activist investing told through the eyes of Robbie Starbuck. Sports as an investment class, driven in part by the rapid growth of women's professional soccer and basketball, and the challenges China faced long before President Trump's most recent round of tariffs.
At this point, this is a zero-sum game in Xi Jinping's mind.
Watch the all-new Wall Street Week. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Bloomberg has the Fed decision under surveillance with the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis, including Powell's press conference. Nobody covers the Fed like Bloomberg.
Barbie is, of course, a gigantic brand now, and it's one of the many, many properties that Mattel has. Do you have similar plans for the whole bunch of other assets that you have?
Yes, we do, and so many learnings from the Barbie movie. But we're really excited about the future when we think about the strength of our brands or our IP. Hot Wheels is a great example. Hot Wheels is all about inspiring that challenger spirit inside of every kid. What it's most known for is racing and the little die-cast vehicle that's very accessibly priced. So interestingly, Hot Wheels is very ubiquitous. It's around the world. We have even more, I would say, penetration of Hot Wheels units than Barbie doll units, around the world, just because of the price point. But we are thinking about Hot Wheels, of course, as a franchise. And we've got a really successful tour that's been in the works now for about 6+ years called the Hot Wheels Legends Tour, where we invite fans of car culture to bring their actual cars that they view as hot wheels to events. And we have judges look at these tricked out cars, and ultimately they choose a winner of these events, and the winner's car gets immortalized into a die-cast toy, which is really fun. Of course, the irony is that our die-cast cars are also inspired by all these other real-life cars. So we kind of, again, go back and forth. But Hot Wheels is doing really well also in digital gaming. Again, the racing play pattern naturally translates to digital games, console, mobile, etc. And, we do have a Hot Wheels theatrical in the works.
So you're taking some of those successful initiatives and moving it across to your other properties as well?
Yes.
Now, we have seen a bunch of announcements about other cinematic releases that are going to happen with your properties, other properties, right? Do you see any challenges now that you have set such a high bar for yourself, which is not easy to reach or cross? And how do you see about you'll bring the successful learnings from this to really take it to, as high as where Barbie is today?
Well, I'm really excited about Masters of the Universe, which we've announced. That will be coming to theaters in June of 2026.
Okay.
But we're very excited to see what that does to the franchise. It's an opportunity to reinvigorate the franchise. It's an origin story. And again, taking a lot of learnings from Barbie. But what's exciting is that because of the Barbie movie, not only do we have a ton of incoming interest,
not surprisingly,
to partner with us and to tap into our catalog of IP, but also I think a lot of these creators are wanting to also challenge maybe their way in to some of these brands and stories. Everyone, I think, is being pushed to think even more broadly, think even, more unexpectedly. Robbie Brenner, who runs our film division, is about creating great stories that connect with audiences and build fandom for our brands. But not every film is going to be the size, the magnitude, or even have the budget of a Barbie, and that's okay. We're looking at all different types of collaborations and executions. But the primary goal is to put great storytelling out there. And if we, again, accelerate other product purchases and, create that deeper fan engagement, that's a big plus.
Has the company changed as a result of the success of Barbie?
I would say yes. We've had for about 5+ years an approach to brand management called the Mattel Playbook, which is driven by 4 pillars. Brand purpose, which we talked a little bit about. So all of our brands are focused on, why they matter, what's that intrinsic value that they bring to consumers. Cultural relevance is another really important driving force for us. How do we stay connected to culture? How do we ensure that many of our brands that are decades old are timeless, but also timely? I would say 2 shifts that we've made recently in that playbook approach has been, we now operate with a franchise mindset. So we think about our toys and any one category as brands, but also ideas. We think about how do we translate these ideas to experiences, to other categories? How do we stretch our audience? And then relentless focus on the consumer. We've always been very consumer-oriented. We've always been a design-led organization, but we now are really honing in on consumer, audience, and fan in a even more surgical way than before.
So, Lisa, in all the marketing successes that I have seen in the recent past, your company certainly stands out beautifully. And Barbie is not just going to be a flash in the pan. Even if it was a gigantic splash in the pan, but I think you'll have immense success, and I wish you the very best of luck. And thank you so very much. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Let's cut right to it. This is Bloomberg's new show, Primer. Technology is a $1 trillion game. Won, lost, won again, just by backing the right science at precisely the right moment.
My life has been focused on how can you elicit intelligence from brain cells in a dish.
This is the fundamental building block of our fusion technology.
We're doing things that have never been done by anybody, ever.
Everyone is selling the future. If you want to understand what's coming, you'll want to watch Primer, because details matter.
Lasers on?
So do lasers.
There we go.
Oh, and it's on all these lovely channels. Hope you're jotting this down.
What would it mean for India to host the Olympics?
Linda, I don't think it's my dream alone. I think it's a dream of 1.4 billion Indians to see the Olympics being held in India. I think once sport takes over, the transformation will be seen, not only in the lives of the youths, but in the economy of our country. India is one of the biggest centers for digital usage, and 1/3 of the viewership of the Olympic channel comes from India. So India as a sporting market is huge.
Countries which have hosted the Olympics have always grappled with the issue of infrastructure, for instance. Building it is one thing, maintaining it is another. How can India do it differently if it were to host the Olympics?
So I think we're talking about innovation and sustainability. And I think the same holds for holding the Olympics. What if you look at a sustainable model? What if you look at refurbishing old stadiums, reusing what we have? So I think the move has to be a sustainable move.
In case you missed it on Balance of Power.
Governor, I wonder if there's a silver lining in any of this for the great industrial towns of your state from the last century. Syracuse, Rochester. Based on what we're hearing from this administration, they will again have a seat at the manufacturing table. Do you believe that?
I hope so, but we have advanced manufacturing, we have pharmaceuticals. In fact, I was able to lure Micron with a $100 billion investment, the largest in our nation's history, to build semiconductors in the Syracuse area, and they'll be affected by this. The component parts to what they're building and the supply chain, they're going to see an increased cost, not just because they're in New York, but because they're in America. And that's what worries me. There could be a silver lining, as you say. I don't know how old I'm going to be when that happens. I mean, what are they going to do? Start building factories now? And, you know, I just don't know. All I know is that people were promised lower prices on Inauguration Day, and guess what? They're going up.
Don't miss Balance of Power live every weekday.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We are basically deep in the European earnings season.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Earnings season is here.
I know it's like your Super Bowl, right?
I can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
Is Trump, as he says he is, ready to do transformational trade deals as long as he gets his interests taken care of? Because if he is, that gives a huge opportunity for the UK to really move the dial on its growth with the US. So I can't imagine that you would shy away from that prospect if it's genuine. What remains to be seen, is it genuine on the part of the US? And we have to test that.
Don't miss the opening trade, live every weekday.
Our subconscious minds are responsible for 90% of our decision making. While our conscious minds are rooted in logic and reasoning, the subconscious mind is based on instinct and emotion. It reacts faster and stronger. This difference between what we think and what we think means that market research could be missing out on consumers' true desires.
When you ask people why they make the decisions the way they do, oftentimes they end up telling you what they think is the reason why they made the decision rather than the true reason behind the decision.
And marketers are losing out.
Only 24% of the time that self-reported data actually correlates to in-market effectiveness.
But could neuroscience help create marketing that is significantly more relevant?
With our technology, there's an 86% correlation to actually predicting sales. So the delta is pretty much double.
And can this technology level the playing field on whose voices are being heard?
The people who do need neuromarketing to be able to tell better stories are things like climate change, looking at world hunger. Those are harder stories to tell. And to that extent, that's the work we want to do.
Raja Rajamannar, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer of MasterCard and a best-selling author writing about our industry's future. Marketing as we practice today was founded on theories and principles from more than 6 decades ago, long before the advent of the internet, social media, or artificial intelligence. I have had a front row seat as new technologies, cultural shifts, and an explosion of data have disrupted the ways of traditional marketing. To connect with the savvy consumers of tomorrow, marketing as we know it must take a quantum leap forward. This is quantum marketing. Neuromarketing refers to the practice of using physiological and neural data to gain insight into consumers' decision-making, ultimately using that data to inform a company's strategy around things like advertising creative and product development. This data can be gathered through tools like fMRI, EEG, eye tracking, and facial coding. The broader marketing industry has been slow to adopt neuromarketing techniques, whether due to cost or skepticism. But studies over the past 20 years have shown the effectiveness of certain types of neuromarketing strategies. I sat down with Pranav Yadav, the global CEO and US founder of neuromarketing company NeuroInsight. To date, NeuroInsight says it has tested over 25,000 ads, including Super Bowl commercials for prominent companies like Anheuser-Busch and T-Mobile. And so, I was looking forward to learning more about the power of this disruptive technology. Hello, Pranav. It's an absolute pleasure and delight to welcome you to this show. And I'm particularly excited to have you here because you're one of those folks who is at the cutting edge of neuromarketing, and you have been doing an amazing job in our industry. So if I can just start off, explain in very simple terms, what exactly is neuromarketing?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Evolutionarily, the way our brains are structured, 90% of all of the decisions that we make on a daily basis take place in the subconscious. And think of the subconscious as this invisible ghost that travels with you wherever you go. It's informed by all the experiences that you've had in your life that you may or may not remember, and yet drive you to action. While you consciously pretend to live life thinking that it's only filled with conscious decisions. Given 90% of decisions are in the subconscious, they are sub, meaning below your conscious awareness.
By definition.
By definition.
Mm-hmm.
So when you ask people why they make the decisions the way they do, oftentimes they end up telling you what they think is the reason why they made the decision rather than the true reason behind the decision. Now, there's $1 trillion that are spent every year on new product innovation, strategy, marketing, or advertising, all relying on that self-reported data, asking people questions. Only 24% of the time, that self-reported data actually correlates to in-market effectiveness. Let that sink in for a second. So if you're spending $1 trillion on marketing and advertising, 750 billion of them are being wasted.
Goes down the drain.
Because you're actually not getting the right information to act upon. So what people say is not what they do. So how do we figure out what they will do? Neuromarketing is a world where we study the true decision-making organ in the body, which is the brain, to figure out how it functions, how people are likely to make decisions based on what we see in the brain.
So what we are saying is, we take marketing decisions as marketers and as businesses based on the insights that we glean.
Correct.
The way we are getting these insights today is mostly by asking consumers to give a conscious response to a decision process which is subconscious.
Exactly.
So in other words, we are expecting consumers to be psychologists and be able to give us very credible answers, which doesn't happen.
100%.
And whereas what you're doing is essentially getting to the subconscious level by looking at the brain and the brain responses, and that's what neuromarketing's first big breakthrough is.
100%, you got it.
Now I'd like to get everyone's first impressions. How about you, Ramon?
It's just stupid.
Okay.
You have probably seen traditional focus groups in movies and TV shows. Maybe you have even been a part of one. Basically, a company will show a product or an advertisement to a select group of people and ask them questions about what they have just seen. But NeuroInsight's focus groups are very different.
Hey guys, hello and welcome to NeuroInsight. Research suggests that only 24% of the time, what you say actually correlates with what you actually do. So what we're going to do today is bypass the rational, conscious filters that we have and actually stick electrodes on your heads and map your brains to figure out how you truly react subconsciously to the content we're about to show you.
They utilize a proprietary electroencephalograph or EEG technology developed by neuroscience professor Richard Silberstein, the founder of the company. The goal is to take the guesswork out of marketing by tapping into consumer subconscious ad preferences in different contexts. With this technology, Pranav and his team can gather huge amounts of data without asking participants a single question.
Is this a negotiation or the new rules of the game?
It could be either.
It is up to the president how he wants to negotiate.
The higher the tariff, the faster they come.
A 90-day pause is not
pattern eradication.
The trade negotiations are moving quickly.
There will be deals cut.
Trust Bloomberg for all the context and clarity you need as the tariff and global economy story evolves.
This year's bear case, very quickly, becoming the base case.
Nobody covers tariffs like Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Now, you have got this device out here. Firstly, if you can just share a little bit of how this device exactly works. Is something piercing my skull, or is it just touching on the top? Or if you can just go into a little bit of detail on this.
Sure. This is our proprietary neuromarketing device.
Okay.
So first, a little bit about how the brain works. We all know it's a complicated network of neurons that fire.
Yep.
Right? So over time, evolutionarily, your brain decided to specialize where it was going to have certain functions. So anytime you have a thought, a slight amount of electrical activity is actually kind of showcased and can be read from your scalp. So there's nothing piercing your skull or anything like that. And actually works even with people with the thickest hair. And so there are these electrodes that are just touching the scalp. And what we can then do is look at the electrical activity on the surface of the scalp. People will be going through an experience. It could be a story, it could be an idea, a concept. Essentially, it's measuring the speed of the electrical activity from 20 different places within the brain. And knowing which part of the brain does what, we can correlate it back to different physiological measures. So the frontal cortex, this is where personal relevance is showcased. The lateral prefrontal cortex, you see activity in this part of the brain when memories are being created. The back of the brain is where you see emotion. If you have that on a second-by-second basis, what you can tell about any piece of strategy, communication, or even product is whether or not subconsciously this is something that you're likely to do in the future or not.
So let me just dive in a little bit more into this, right? So are we saying that there is a topography of the brain and different parts of the brain do different things?
Exactly.
And depending on which part of the brain lights up, this device that you have created tracks that.
Exactly.
And therefore, as a marketer, if I'm doing research using this device, I'm having a more credible response saying that, hey, this is what exactly is happening. Now, you mentioned about the kind of emotions, etc. Does it also check feelings? And I'll tell you what exactly I mean. Marketers used to say that purchase decisions are all based on logic and rational thinking.
Right.
But that myth got burst.
Sure.
Now we know it's a universal fact that purchase decisions are based on emotions and feelings. Now you mentioned about emotions. Is it true for feelings also?
Well, first, I will even challenge that paradigm. I will challenge the paradigm that emotions are the drivers of decisions. The reason why that became a paradigm is because we actually did not have a way to measure emotions.
Right.
And because we didn't have a way to measure emotions, this overall concoction of this blind thing that we couldn't measure, which I am calling the subconscious, was clubbed under the emotional umbrella. But now we can distinguish whether it's emotion or something else driving the decision. Emotion is a huge driver of decision making. About 65% of the time, you actually have emotion correlated with decision making. But there's one factor that even trumps emotion in terms of decision making, as a driver, and that is personal relevance. Personal relevance is a higher driver of decision making than emotional intensity. And marketers have known this inherently, implicitly for the longest time, but somehow we clubbed everything under that emotional bucket. But there's another magical thing that happens in the brain that has an 86% correlation to behavior. And that's neither relevance nor emotion. And it is memory. The traditional view of memory, even in neuroscience, is that of one like a library. That you have a library of memories, and if I were to go to you and say, Raja, what were you doing on your 21st birthday? You pick out that book of that memory and you tell me exactly what happened. That is neither the role of memory, and that's not how that works. In my past 14 years of doing this, here's what I've learned in this one line. Memories are neither an active nor an accurate repository of the past. Memories are guideposts to future behavior.
Amazing.
Evolutionarily, you save memories to become who you want to become in the future. You selectively keep information that will inform you to make those choices to become who you want to become. If you saw someone wear a beautiful jacket like this 20 years ago, subconsciously it was stored in you in a way that in the future, when you make that choice, you make that choice. So all of marketing and advertising is giving you information today for you to make a choice tomorrow.
Right.
If there's an ad for a brand of car, nobody expects anybody to go buy that car today.
Instantly, yeah.
What you hope is that you create a subconscious memory for it, and a year from now, when you have the need and the resources to buy a car, this memory pops up and you make this choice. That memory creation, the subconscious long-term memory creation, is the biggest driver of behavior. And in our work, we've seen about an 86% correlation to predicting sales when you
based
measure
on the memory.
Based on measuring memory.
That's pretty fascinating. So you got 3 layers happening out here. One is what's the relevance. Second, what's the emotion that it is generating, and then the long-term memory.
And how you should think of these layers is that memory is a binary layer. If you have memory, you will base decisions on it. If you do not have memory, you will not base decisions on it, no matter the amount of emotion. So memory is a binary 0 or 1 correlating to decision. You should look at emotion and personal relevance and visual delight as drivers of memory creation. So there are times when emotion drives memory creation, there are times when relevance drives memory creation, and there's sometimes a remarkably unique experience that's a visual delight that will help you do that. So there's various ways to do that. Clearly, relevance and emotion are the greatest drivers of memory, but these are nothing but drivers.
Typically, we are able to create experiences for a small number of people.
Yes.
And people who go through it, they have fantastic experience. But then when they are sharing their memories and they are talking about what experience that they had, and if the relevance is there of these people to the other audience that you want to reach, is it something like someone who I can relate to who is having this experience, which gets lodged in my memory?
100%. In fact, brand building is nothing but creating a set of memories. You use different toolkits of how to do that in the ways that you will do. The human brain is a pattern-seeking and storytelling device. The only way it knows how to experience life is through a story. So your mass marketing happens through mass market stories. And as you tell those stories, people are actually traveling and creating memories for your stories. So not only is your job to create a memory for that story, your job is to actually bring your brand in the moment of the story when the memory creation is the greatest. Exactly.
Fantastic.
The neuroscience is not needed to tell a good story. We're just able to measure the arc in a way that's never been able to measure before. And you're absolutely right. When someone goes through an experience, for them to go tell their audience who has the same kind of cultural lens to look at things creates a set of personal relevance and opens that doorway to memory in ways that you wouldn't have opened for someone else. Because this person already exists deeper within your life, and it's a continuation of an older story. So it's a revival of older memories as well. And that's the greatest way to create new memories as well, because you're already making the brain open the doorway to memory.
Wow, extraordinary. Now, tell me, as a marketer, if I ask this question, which is, okay, I rely on my traditional market research, I get a certain level of success. And if I move to this, what could be the jump that I can potentially get based on all the research that you have done? Do you see it enhances it by 10%, 20%, 30%? What is the kind of range typically of enhanced effectiveness?
The correlation of traditional market research tools to in-market efficacy is 24%. Right? With our technology, there's an 86% correlation to actually predicting sales. So the delta is pretty much double. But because measurement on the other side is also not that accurate, it takes a while. So those correlations are harder sometimes for marketers to come to, but the jump is huge.
All right, let's cut right to it. This is Bloomberg's new show, Primer. Technology is a trillion-dollar game. Won, lost, won again, just by backing the right science at precisely the right moment.
My life has been focused on how can you elicit intelligence from brain cells in a dish.
This is the fundamental building block of our fusion technology.
We're doing things that have never been done by anybody, ever.
Everyone is selling the future. If you want to understand what's coming, you'll want to watch Primer, because details matter.
Lasers on?
So do lasers.
There we go.
Oh, and it's on all these lovely channels. Hope you're jotting this down.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute global economic news from around the world whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Oliver Crook at the European Commission in Brussels, and this is Bloomberg.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week.
Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg Television. Today, CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders. The Spanish bank BBVA has gained worldwide respect for its efficiency and commitment to innovation. CFO Luisa Gomez Bravo welcomes the challenge of keeping her company on the cutting edge.
In the world that is changing so fast, having a finance function that adapts quickly is crucial.
Watch Chief Future Officer Wednesday on Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories.
And we're here, where the action starts in Sydney.
And in Tokyo, get ahead as the global trading day begins.
The Asia Trade, weekdays only on Bloomberg.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, Mondays on Bloomberg.
Before I finished my conversation with Pranav, I wanted to see for myself how NeuroInsights technology can be used to inform the creative of an actual advertisement.
So what I want to do is actually show you some real-life data that we acquired from about 60 people on a climate change campaign from the World Wildlife Fund. So on the x-axis is just time. On the y-axis is the metric that we're measuring. In this case, it's memory encoding for detail.
We are the last generation who can stop devastating climate change. The last generation who can save the ice caps, save wildlife, and save ourselves.
They've basically pitched with a drastic end to the world, like we're the last generation that we can do this.
Yep.
Hoping to get that message across, but actually you see that people are not committing any of this to detailed memory. So this is not an idea that people are registering.
It's not resonating with them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Actually, this idea that we're the last generation who can do that is actually personally relevant to people, as you're seeing this in the blue line.
Yeah.
It is not emotionally engaging to people. And this combination of there being personal relevance, not emotional intensity, the message is not deemed important enough for the brain to actually
put in the memory.
Commit to memory.
Got it.
I suspect what's happening is that this is such a generic kind of communication in climate change. There seems to be a formula where we show them scary images of the world ending. But the way our brains work, for things that are actually distant in the future, even though they're critical,
they don't register the got it.
So it's not being translated. So threat or like scaring people works in case of a pharma or an insurance ad because the result is actually tomorrow.
Yep.
If something happens to you tomorrow, your family will suffer if you don't have this insurance. Whereas something will happen in the next generation, is not something that's important enough for people to commit to memory in this kind of story format. So we advised, all the climate change communication people that they need to find a different story arc altogether, that despite having personal relevance, it's not been committed to memory.
Understood. So, Pranav, I think this is really, really valuable. You are not only telling me what is engaging and what is not engaging, but you're telling me which part of the ad is making a difference.
Exactly.
Whether it is to the engagement or whether it is to the emotional intensity, and if thereby, is it being committed to my brain or not as a consumer? So there is actionability in these insights. It's not just insight for the sake of insight and say, yeah, this is bad, so what?
Correct. What it does for you is identify the exact moments that you can capitalize on.
Yeah, I see that.
And especially when in a world of integrated campaigns across social media and out of home and digital, what this is brilliant at figuring out is that if you have a 30-second piece for your TV, then what is the 5-second piece for Instagram? What is the 3-second piece for TikTok? What is the still image for out of home and banner? All of them integrated in a way that the moment people view them, it triggers the memory structures that you have created with this 30-second piece, so it works together in harmony.
Absolutely, makes complete sense. So, Pranav, I thought that this is one of the best sessions, really. Very insightful and extremely fascinating. And I keep talking about this being really at the forefront of quantum marketing, which, as you know, I'm very passionate about.
Thank you, sir. And lastly, which is the sad part, hate, jealousy, superficialism, materialism sells itself. They don't have to use neuromarketing to be able to do that. The people who do need neuromarketing to be able to tell better stories are things like climate change. Looking at world hunger, looking at making choices that require people to actually make some sort of a sacrifice and change. Those are harder stories to tell. And to that extent, that's the work we want to do.
I cannot imagine a scenario where $8 billion just disappears.
This is the nature of capitalism. Get over it.
So I have to call you out about something.
Sure.
Where are all the women?
What's up, everyone? It's Haley.
Trust me, I get that. There's been this talk about the kill switch.
I hope it's clear that's a joke.
This is a way to change culture. It's really for everyone.
My name is Nikolai Coster-Waldau.
This is the definition of thinking outside the box.
Hey, I'm Kal Penn.
We've all been used as guinea pigs for the last 70 to 80 years.
It's so much bigger than sports.
Elon always knew that we were going to be super successful. Holy, he was right.
We're building another art museum called the Guggenheim. Now, Louvre's big enough. Why do you need a Guggenheim as well, right next door?
I think it's a great question. I think the beautiful thing about the UAE and Abu Dhabi is we live with over 200 nationalities. And in doing so, they have become a part of the country's and the city's fabric. And we need to celebrate that. So we need to celebrate everybody's identity, everybody's background, everybody's heritage, everybody's history. And what a beautiful way in doing so in these beautiful institutions. These museums are educational institutions and they're community institutions. So we wanted to curate really a story where you come to Saadiyat Cultural District and you, if you allow me to curate the story, you start off at the Natural History Museum. And at the Natural History Museum, you get a glimpse and you get an understanding of how we came to be, how our Earth came to be, how our universe came to be, from a scientific perspective. Once you leave the Natural History Museum, you go to our National Museum, the Sheikh Zayed National Museum. There you understand the history of this great land. Not just the history of the country, but the people of this land that have been a part of this land for over 300,000 years. You get a glimpse of what the past and the present and the future looks like here in the UAE. From there, you maneuver yourself to the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which is a beautiful universal museum. It is universal in its thematic approach. So there, you basically see a part of you on an equal pedestal with the entire world.
In case you missed it, on the China Show,
President Trump has called Wednesday Liberation Day, and that seems like liberation from the rules-based order on trade.
We're seeing a lot of orders being canceled, particularly on product being sourced out of China. There's a threat to seeing a shortage of certain products because, look, China's our #1 supplier of footwear. When I got this job 15 years ago, it was 88% of our volume to the U.S. It's now 56% of our volume. But the fact of the matter is, most of that volume is for price-conscious consumers here in the States.
One of the things you see here when you talk to suppliers and buyers is that this essentially gives Asia and Africa to Chinese supply chains an influence, because now as American firms have to focus more on the home market, the companies and organizations with the money to invest in new areas, that will be mostly Chinese money.
don't miss the China Show live every weekday.
US tech is influencing global markets.
Technology is driving business across Europe.
Companies in Asia are betting on tech.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at the Federal Reserve, and this is Bloomberg.
Is this a negotiation or the new rules of the game?
It could be either.
It is up to the president how he wants to negotiate.
The higher the tariff, the faster they come.
A 90-day pause is not an eradication.
The trade negotiations are moving quickly.
There will be deals cut.
Trust Bloomberg for all the context and clarity you need as the tariff and global economy story evolves.
This year's bear case, very quickly, becoming the base case.
Nobody covers tariffs like Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Welcome to Bloomberg's Women, Money and Power event in London. I'm Anna Edwards. For the first time ever, Bloomberg is bringing together the most influential female voices in finance from around the world to debate and discuss the biggest themes facing the future of finance and business. On the agenda, the future of investing, asset management and banking, to the role of women as consumers, owners and as CEOs. Women around the world are controlling a greater share of wealth and making more of the key financial decisions.
We are in the midst of the largest wealth transfer in history right at this very moment. So $100 trillion of wealth is going to next-gen and millennial clients over the next decade. So that has some pretty significant implications. But in addition to that, women are controlling more and more global wealth.
I got very comfortable at a very young age being an outsider. But what that has meant throughout my entire career in semiconductors, sector, in venture capital, and in startup world is that I'm always looking at how do we make sure those outside voices are brought into the technology development.
I've been on a journey in women's football as a player, but I really wanted to be part of the future of commercializing the game, reimagining the game, providing equity and power to players.
I've gotten to know Carrie and the executive producer and the screenwriter who came up with the concept of The Diplomat. Her name is Deborah Kahn, but when she first brought that to the studios, they said to her, "Oh, it's a great plot, but there'll never be a female ambassador to the UK."
There you go.
So anyway, I'm the second in 200 years.
One thing that is really remarkable about LA is that the majority of major museums are currently run by women. There's sort of a moment.
That's a big responsibility, but it also gives a lot of opportunities. So our investment horizons is basically infinite.
The global investing industry has undergone dramatic shifts in recent years as the biggest firms are getting bigger. Passive funds are closing the gap with active managers, and the rise of private capital is turning up the heat on the competition. Franklin Templeton President and CEO Jenny Johnson shared her thoughts on the industry's demand for innovation and adaptation.
I think a lot of the growth in alternatives actually comes from kind of the 2008 financial crisis. So one, with banks not changing the capital requirements around banks really want to preserve their capital for their biggest and best clients. And so it created this opportunity for private credit to step in. I think that honestly, low interest rates were probably one of the things that fueled private equity, but also a bit of the environment where I think less and less companies want to go public, and I don't think that trend changes. I don't think there's a lot of people going, boy, I'd really like to be a public company CEO these days. And I think in a time where you have all these great technological advances like AI, where companies need to invest in the technology that may not pay off for years, it's really hard with the pressure of quarterly earnings. And so in some cases, transforming a company ends up being better in the structure of private equity. So I think like that trend is here. I think, and I'm a big fan of blockchain. I think that's going to open up new investment opportunities and kind of interesting things. I always say that eventually your financial advisor is going to report your portfolio in three ways. They're going to say, here's your investment return, here's the impact you have, and by the way, here are the loyalty programs that you've gotten from your tokenized equity ownership that have now tied loyalty programs to it. So that's where I think things ultimately evolve.
So on blockchain and Bitcoin, does that change significantly under a Trump administration?
Oh, for sure. And again, I always make sure you separate Bitcoin from blockchain. Okay, so
Fair.
Bitcoin, different deal. I was a skeptic of it initially, but a couple things people said to me. One, somebody who lived in Israel said, my parents and grandparents had their money taken away by the government. They will always keep a portion of their savings in Bitcoin. And then I had actually an employee who lived in the Middle East and said, if I say the wrong thing, I can have my accounts frozen. So I always keep a percentage of my earnings in Bitcoin. And obviously in the kind of key, because they can keep it protected. So if you grow up in a society where you feel your money's safe, you think that doesn't make any sense. And why should this external currency come in? But if you actually think that there's a lot of the world that would like that safety and control, you can see where Bitcoin has a lot of opportunity. And then blockchain, again, it's a technology. It's a technology that's going to do a lot of really good things in financial services. A lot of toll takers take a piece of a transaction. That can eliminate it, and so it's going to create more efficiencies. It's going to open up investment opportunities.
Jenny, do you think that there'll be a catalyst for companies to want to go public again, or is it just private all the way? Is this a trend for the next 5-10 years?
So I actually think it used to be you go venture, private equity, IPO, public markets. I think that stays, and we see it where people are just waiting a lot longer to go public. But at some point, people want that liquidity and monetize it, and the private markets aren't yet that liquid. There's some amount. But I actually think what you're starting to see is public companies being taken private because we invested in a company, Envestnet, and they have $3 trillion in assets by financial advisor platform, right? They need to invest in it. It is hard as a public company to make those kind of investments and say to the street, hey, by the way, this is going to impact earnings for the next 18 months. So they become private, right? And so they were taken private by Bain Capital, and then they'll go public, I think, again. So I think there's going to be this new cycle of pulling people off, doing the investment that needs to happen, whether it's AI investments or whatever, and then going public again.
Another area of the finance industry facing disruption, hedge funds. Firms are under more pressure than ever to deliver alpha and justify their fees. So how do the top funds effectively compete for investor dollars? Man Group CEO Robin Grew shared her strategy with Bloomberg's Caroline Gage.
This is a time when I think the alternative investment management space has everything to play for. It's a time when clients need us more. It's a time when we're coming out of this rather benign environment where you had, as asset holders, everything just held onto it and you'd be fine. We're now in states of volatility and dispersion. And so how do you grow? How do you service your clients? One, you ensure you're relevant to them. You know that they need more from you. The more diversified the content you have, the better for them. The more you're able to find solutions for them and answers for them that actually address the questions and the challenges that they are living through. And you do that by looking at your ability to have that orthogonal or uncorrelated content and capability that delivers returns to them through these different economic cycles that we're now living through. So how do you grow your assets? You listen to your clients, you make sure you're relevant to them, you grow your capabilities to deliver that to them, and it's hard work, but that's what you have to do.
How important is scale, and what are you hearing from them on that front?
There's definitely a consolidation. There's a consolidation both at allocators but also at investment managers. That thing where you say, I need to face fewer managers who can help me do more. So that consolidation is there. So scale matters in the sense of being able to deliver all of that capability to them. And it matters in the way that you build your organization so you are able to deliver what you deliver without reducing the alpha that you've captured. So it's no good finding this very elusive thing called alpha and outperformance only to lose it through your own inefficiencies. So scale and capability, your operating platform, which might not sound the most exciting thing for us all to talk about, but happens to be incredibly important, is the thing that I think is important in that scale debate or that conversation too. So can you deliver what you have at scale efficiently and return as much alpha to clients as possible without losing it through your own inefficiencies?
How fierce is the competition right now for talent in your business?
Huge, massive. It's always going to be that way. The competition is in every part. If you want the very best people, you have to recognize that you have to provide them with an environment and a space and an offer that makes them feel great about coming into work every day. So the competition is fierce, but actually I feel quite good about Man's positioning. So from a discretionary fundamental investing perspective, do the platforms have an tension of war, of a tug of war, of great capability? Absolutely. But are there things that make it different? Is this just about money at the end of the day? Listen, we work in financial services. There's a value proposition here that everybody lives with. But I would wager that most people in this audience, if not everybody, could go and get another job tomorrow. Maybe they could go and get a slight increase in their comp tomorrow. But most people in this audience will also think about the culture they want to live in, the value set they're alongside, whether they can grow their capability in their business. If you're an investor, whether you have sources of capital that come from more than one place. You'll think about the tech that you have, the operating platform you have, the access to clients you have. You'll think about whether you want a global stage or not. In other words, this talent piece is not a binary thing either. If you're a technologist, you like dealing. My experience, we have about 650 of them, self-identified technologists in some form or other, quants or data scientists or modelers or developers. They love being and having access to the very best technology. They want to be put in a box, and they love solving real-world problems and challenges. That's what we do every day when we come to work. So you're giving the brightest minds the best capability to solve real-world issues that are very, very hard. That's exciting.
Still ahead from the Bloomberg Women, Money and Power event in London.
My ambition is to be a high-returning, high-quality earnings, modern, simpler institution that continues to play a shaping role in the global financial system.
up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Stephen Engel at the Forbidden City in Beijing, and this is Bloomberg.
For us, certainly AI is the way in which we are running our business.
The risks associated with that are a lot because all of a sudden we could lose control. All of a sudden, in the short term, even we can delegate too much and lose a sense of reality.
I really do believe we're in a new era of discovery with AI, and but I think about risk a lot. Right, it keeps me up at night, both the opportunity and the risk.
I think that geopolitics is probably going to be the biggest ground shift that occurs in the world of finance. We've seen, and I mean world from the global perspective, we've seen so many shifts in the lanes. I see technology flows changing, where they're going and the nature of them, particularly with AI, data centers, energy flows to support them.
And by the way, the reason I'm much more optimistic about what happens, and hopefully we understand that we need to do something. I do think we're at a crossroads. I think we know what has to be done, and there are opportunities.
Welcome back. I'm Anna Edwards. Geopolitical volatility, regulatory shifts, and AI advancements all pose risks and opportunities for the finance industry. Citi CEO Jane Fraser shared how she is looking to the future with our own Sonali Basak.
Given the world is changing so quickly, where is the most promise over the next 5 years? And what regions of the world do you see as lagging?
I always like to talk about bright spots first. So I think the bright spots is America. If you talk about a lot of roads leading here, fantastic entrepreneurship. I mean, this country is incredible. I love how Japan is turning up, focused on returns, moving from savings to investment. Entrepreneurs also on the front foot there. So that's exciting. Most of ASEAN as well, really adapting and adopting a lot of new technologies. The Middle East is a different Middle East. As a woman, I find it really exciting to go there and see how quickly it has changed, and the female population is being unleashed in many of these countries in a very positive way. And I wouldn't forget Brazil and Mexico as areas where we're also seeing tremendous innovation. So I think those are, that's a pretty broad group of winners there. Europe has a tougher time. They've got some more structural challenges. Labour market is not as flexible. They don't have the scale that the States has. And they've got some challenges in terms of competitiveness. So that would be a quick walk around the world of the highs.
While the world is changing, so too is the world of finance.
Yes.
In particular, you've seen for many years now the banks cede some share to the non-banks, and you made a lot of news this year when you struck a partnership with Apollo, a $25 billion partnership in order to provide more private credit to your clients. Where do you see the private markets going at the end of the day?
When you look at a transaction and a partnership like the one we have with Apollo, you're looking at a win-win. And as we look at it, we're marrying our strength in origination and some of their power on their balance sheet in areas that we can't compete with them on, and put it together in 1 + 1 = 3 for our clients, because we're still giving our clients choice. And I think that's what we see the private market as. In non-investment grade clients in particular, and companies, it's giving them an additional market to tap into. Some points, the private and public market, there's no arbitration between the two. Last couple of years, you saw the private market advantaged. The goal here from our perspective, give the client as much choice as possible. Again, what does it mean? I come back to America as a proud immigrant. What you see here is the depth and breadth of capital market. We have 50% of the world's capital market. We keep innovating. The scale and specialization it affords is really tremendous. You just don't see that as much in the rest of the world. And that, I think it means, why does the US keep being the winner in the global financial and capital markets? It is because it deserves to be.
At that end, too, what is the biggest risk to the industry over the next 5 years? Where do you have to look around the corner the most?
the piece that keeps me up at night is always cyber risk. And I think when we think about fraud, AI, and cyber, and the sort of convergence of those capabilities and the speed with which activity can be done now and that compute is going, that definitely continues to keep me awake at night the most. So I think that is the larger threat. At the end of the day, this industry is about trust. And so I think all of the larger institutions are putting a lot of resources to make sure that we can protect our institutions and our clients.
Jane, where do you see Citigroup in 5 years? You have embarked on this massive transformation. What is your greatest ambition?
Oh, well, my ambition is to be a high-returning, high-quality earnings, modern, simpler institution that continues to play a shaping role in the global financial system. We're truly privileged to be in as many locations as we are, with a talent base with such a global mindset and an ambition about it. So I think about we've got the right strategy and vision, we're executing with the right organization, and that we're a simpler, well-controlled, modern organization. We'll have got the job done.
Well, yeah, we're looking to the American. Definitely, I'm sure.
Still ahead from the Bloomberg Women, Money and Power event in London.
We had nothing when I bought the team, and it was just a case where I had to be patient. And as I've watched the WNBA grow, and there were steps and missteps in hiring coaches, basketball operations people, this is a very, very hard business.
The names that move markets are on Bloomberg.
Is Latin America policy also China policy for this administration?
What we are trying to keep from happening is what has happened on the African continent. China has signed a number of these rapacious deals marked as aid. They've taken mineral rights, added huge amounts of debt. They're guaranteeing future generations are going to be poor and without resources, and we don't want that to happen in Latin America.
Nobody covers business like Bloomberg.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Women's sports has opened the door for the other half of the world, becoming not only a really good investment opportunity, but also representing a gender equality movement that is probably going to be the most powerful one that we experience in our lifetime.
Welcome back, I'm Anna Edwards. The rising popularity of women's sports has rippled across the globe. Projected to surpass the $1 billion mark in revenue for the first time ever in 2024. In the United States, the excitement around basketball star Caitlin Clark is setting new records for viewership of the women's game. Yet the global picture remains patchy, with teams and leagues only sporadically being backed by media rights and institutional investment. While investment in women's sports is still a fraction of the more than $11 billion of revenue generated by men's sport, more women are watching and more are investing.
This is a case where it was an opportunity that was brought to me, and people kept saying to me, do not do this. Do not do it. And I said, look, the WNBA is now the longest running women's professional sports team. And I could see where was passion with so many people coming in to watch the Mystics and the WNBA as a whole. We had a really solid fan base from the very beginning. And I decided that I was going to take this leap of faith and decide to do it. And at the time, I was the only woman that had invested in a professional sports team. Now, when the opportunity was brought to me and I looked at the financials, and I'm like, I'm going to be writing a lot of checks over the years. But I came up with another idea. Abe Pollin, who owned the Washington Capitals, had sold it to Ted Leonsis. Ted then had first right of refusal once Abe passed away to buy the Washington Wizards. So I called Ted at the time that Abe came to me and wanted to know if he wanted to buy the WNBA team. And I said, I'm going to give you an offer you can't refuse. And I said, you can get a woman and an African American. And I want to buy into all three teams. And the reason why I did it, because financially, that gave me the foundation to keep that women's team going. So any losses were going to be funneled through the Wizards and the Caps, who I knew were profitable. So by joining them and putting a lot more money into it, I again took a leap of faith. And what you have to understand, it was a passion project, still is. And from 2005 until this year, we've been losing money. And it was a case where, from the very beginning, I had to invest even more money to build locker rooms, to get office space. We had nothing when I bought the team. And it was just a case where I had to be patient. And as I've watched the WNBA grow, and there were steps and missteps in hiring coaches, basketball operations people, this is a very, very hard business. I want you all to know this. You can call it a vanity play, you can call it whatever you want, but it is a business. It was trying to make the numbers work. And back to your question, the reason why the WNBA is now working, we are now, and I'm going to list all the networks we're on: ABC, CBS, ESPN, ESPN2, ION, NBA TV. That media play has now catapulted us from 0 to over 200 million. So now, for the first time, the W is going to start getting a payback. We now have charter flights for the girls. We're really doing well. And that is important because we have been fighting for this for a long, long time. But look how old we are. We're 28 years old now. It takes that kind of time and patience and love and the passion to really invest in women, and especially in the sports industry.
That's a wrap from Bloomberg's Women, Money and Power event here in London. You can find more from top voices in finance at Bloomberg.com.
The top names in business are on Bloomberg.
The U.S. has behaved like somebody who has a golden credit card. That's the way we've behaved. And that's the way Washington has spent money. Can the events of the recent days change that? Can they cause there to be a credit limit? Can they cause a bill to be presented at some point in time? If the answer to either or both of those questions is yes, that's a real risk.
Nobody covers business like Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Crypto.
We believed in crypto for a very long time. We believed in DeFi. When you look at DeFi and the power of that, I mean, it's really restoring the power back to the people. There's nothing that DeFi, there's nothing that cryptocurrency on blockchain can't do better, cheaper, in every way faster, more transparently than the financial system that we have right now. There's not a Friday that goes by where I'm not chasing a swift wire transfer, hoping it comes in on, before the 4 p.m. deadline or trying to send one out. You could transfer millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin overseas, while having a glass of wine with your wife at 11 o'clock at night. That's a beautiful thing. Our financial system in this country is antiquated. Our financial system in this country has been punitive to so many different people. And so we're reinventing the financial system. I'm all in, personally. I really, truly believe in this with every part of my heart and soul.
Don't miss Bloomberg Crypto live Tuesdays.
Bloomberg Surveillance covers the latest in global markets and the political events that influence your world. Join Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern, only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next?
On this episode, the continent has been silent, and people are always looking for new. And new means us bringing our stories to the world, told in a way and manner that is just going to wow you.
Premieres April 25th, only on Bloomberg.
Welcome to Bloomberg Invest. I'm Shonali Basak. We're going to hear from some of the top names in asset management, banking, wealth, and private markets. They are the industry's most influential voices who know how to build empires, protect portfolios, and create the next big thing. And when they spoke at the Bloomberg Invest event in New York at the beginning of March, President Trump's favorite word was at the top of the agenda, and that's tariff. Almost every CEO is gauging what an unpredictable Trump administration would mean, given trade and economic relationships are shifting drastically around the world.
I think the administration inherited quite a stable economy. Inflation obviously not exactly where the Federal Reserve would like it, but it's come down dramatically. And so the environment feels quite good. Now, in terms of what we're seeing in that data, there's nothing suggesting today that the economic underpinnings of that have shifted dramatically at all. What you're starting to see, though, are the things I just described, which is preemptive actions around how best to position, again, around the uncertainty. The way I would describe it is for a long period of time, geopolitical economic risk tails were very tight. They're just fatter today, and we'll have to see over the next 3, 6, 9 months how the tariff discussions play out and what does it mean. But this uncertainty factor obviously is affecting markets.
Where do you see the direction of travel? More recent economic data has created some cause for concern among investors.
I think the Fed has done an extraordinary job. I think at this point, given we don't exactly know how the tariffs will ultimately settle, I think the inflationary question is a bit uncertain. So what I mean by that is there is a path where you could see a one-time bump in prices, assuming there's no trade war and no future escalation, that will translate through the system as higher prices. It may also cause some demand destruction, which longer term would be deflationary. And you actually could see the economy experiencing stress as it goes through that. So I would say that all the parameters around forecasting inflation, forecasting interest rates, I just think we should all buckle up a bit, because markets will be more volatile, super data-centric, probably too data-centric, because you can't extrapolate one data point to the future, but it's going to be a sort of a wait and see. I do think the administration will be very sensitive to pro-growth policies, and so I think they'll be watching also.
I think the one thing
that market participants maybe have underestimated. In the first term, we all said Trump is very SPX sensitive, and that was invariably the truth. I think with Scott, I think their pain tolerance is different, and I think they're more sensitive to a broader set of asset classes, and I think they might believe that ultimately they have more levers to pull when and where they need it. That said, when you think about tariffs, we can all look at a textbook and we can say, and I think the Treasury Secretary said it today, manufacturers will absorb the price pressure, and then you can also argue that it's a one-time price shift. But I think what you can't control is consumer confidence and corporate confidence, and I think that is what is falling off a cliff right now.
Do you think, Dawn, that the market is correct to be, as of now, pricing in 3 rate cuts in 2025?
I would take the other side of that bet because, again, I think ultimately they will bear more pain than I think market participants originally thought, but there will be a limit. And I think they will make deals.
I've spent my entire career focused on fiscal discipline. We balanced the budget in 1998, first time in 30 years. I think we knew what the heck we were doing. I don't think these people have the foggiest notion what they're doing. And I think DOGE is doing tremendous damage to government and to the recipients of government services and government activities. Now, are there excess expenditure? Are there inefficiencies? And is there excess regulation? Yes. But you approach it with a rational cost-benefit analysis, not a burn and the burning down of what exists, and then the thought that you rebuild it. And I think we really are doing tremendous damage to government and to our economy.
As you think about the world, geoeconomically and geopolitically, the anchor, the sacrosanct anchor that the U.S. has is rule of law. It has never been a factor in any conversations that we've had up to this point.
Is it a factor now?
It is moving into the conversation in ways that we haven't visited historically. So we need to be very mindful of conversations that today, it is not central to the conversations, but it has now become part of the conversation where historically it hasn't been. The randomness that appears to be at play here is not one that gives boards and CEOs a lot of confidence. So whatever the new normal is, will they react? The answer is they will react whenever we get there. If it's a new normal of continued unpredictability, then it's not quite certain how aggressive people are going to act. So I would continue to pay attention to the volatility index. I would continue to pay attention to the 10-year Treasury, which I think what the administration is going to look into as guidance, and see if we get to a new normal, what that new normal looks like. It's not clear yet.
I think what we have to try and figure out is what is the objective of the tariffs. And that, to me, I think that's where a lot of us are struggling. Is the tariffs meant to make foreign products more expensive so the domestic product is cheaper? Okay, that's a good use of a tariff. The problem is a lot of the things that we import, we actually don't make here in the United States. So you can make the foreign product more expensive. It doesn't make the domestic product cheaper because we don't have it. So I think we have to figure out what the objective is. If the objective is to raise money for the government, like, make that the objective. I'm not sure how you do that. And how do you do that with weighing the effects of inflation on the other side? And I think you have to think about that. So if we're just using it as a revenue raiser, it creates a higher cost of goods. It's a really regressive way to raise revenue because I hate to say it, like the reality of it is poor people or less highly paid people consume 100% of their paychecks. Wealthier people consume a very small percentage of their paychecks, and they have to consume their paychecks. So the things that are being tariffed are things that everyday people buy, and it becomes a really regressive tax system. I don't think we want a regressive tax system. I'm the first guy here that's going to argue for a progressive tax system. The rich people need to pay more in this country. They should pay more, and they do pay more today. I don't think we want to flip that around through tariffs. So to me, the question is, what is the objective here? Like, there may be a real robust, bona fide reason to have tariffs. I just don't know what we're trying to achieve.
When you own so many businesses, when you have so many types of debt and equity tied to companies around the world, how do you think about the way this is evolving?
What I'd say is we try to take a little bit of a longer-term perspective, that there is tariff diplomacy going on, and that what is happening now could change depending on what market participants, what government officials do. And you've got to take that longer-term approach and hope, or maybe expect at some point, that they'll get to outcomes, markets will calm, and actually in a moment like this, you look around and say, are there good businesses that are now on sale? We can deploy capital into this volatility. So I would just say to investors, be a little bit patient here. Let this tariff diplomacy play out a bit.
How do you think the tariffs are going to affect the economy? Why does President Trump like tariffs so much?
Well, the president's been very focused on tariffs for a long time. And he fundamentally believes it's a good source of revenue and that it's impactful in getting people to change behavior. And that's what we're seeing today.
Okay. All right. So you think that tariffs will be ultimately good for the U.S. economy, I assume? You have a similar view?
Well, I think the market really wants certainty and understanding certainty and will adjust to whatever they are. I think the problem right now is we don't have certainty. My own view on the tariffs would be that if he wants to do something, I like the idea of the 10% tariff across the board. It's a consumption tax on foreign goods. But if he were to do that, he should do that through the reconciliation process, so that can be scored, I think would raise about $2.5 trillion and could be used to pay for tax cuts, as an example.
Coming up, when the word of the day is uncertainty, where is the smart money looking to invest?
More people have seen Bigfoot in the last, decade and a half than business cycle, most likely. And that means all of us are to some degree asleep.
Earnings season is here.
I know it's like your Super Bowl, right?
I can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
I'm David Weston. Join me for the next generation of Wall Street Week. This week, faith-based activist investing told through the eyes of Robbie Starbuck. Sports as an investment class, driven in part by the rapid growth of women's professional soccer and basketball, and the challenges China faced long before President Trump's most recent round of tariffs.
At this point, this is a zero-sum game in Xi Jinping's mind.
Watch the all-new Wall Street Week. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Invest. I'm Shonali Bassick. Investors face uncertainty at home and abroad. From Wall Street to Main Street, every move counts. At the Bloomberg Invest event in New York at the beginning of March, we spoke to some of the industry's most influential voices. Uncertainty could be a killer for economic activity and for CEO confidence, but volatility could also create chances for big gains in the markets. Investors managing tens, even hundreds of billions of dollars say that they're also looking more to private markets to find alpha.
Private credit rose up from this idea that middle market companies should have access to loans to be able to do deals, and the success of that built on it and built on it. And I think what you're seeing now is, as private credit succeeded and got into bigger and bigger deals, the line blurs as to what is an obvious private credit deal versus an obvious BSL deal, and it allows, I think, a lot of flexibility for borrowers to figure out what's best for that individual company. If you think of really what the definition of private credit is, from a norm perspective, it's that not too many people are in the loan, that you know who is in it, and then most importantly, if something goes wrong, your lenders are going to think about it as a relationship, as a repeat player, and they are going to work with the sponsor in a conciliatory way to deal with the business.
We can't really get to a true business cycle until the consumer rolls over because it's 70% of GDP. The consumer's already in a recession and has been for a while on the very low end of the market, just not the high end of the market. And I think as many people here know, 50% of consumption in the U.S. is driven by the top 10% of the consumer. So you need to see a crack there to really get the business cycle moving. Employment will be part of that. I'd also watch equity markets because this top 10% of the consumer, a lot of their wealth is in houses and in equity markets, and they're transferring that wealth, the baby boomers, to the next generation. So I want to posit to all of you that the transmission mechanism may be a little bit different this time around and come a lot through equity markets. So that's something to watch. I'll end by saying where we interestingly do see some opportunity, even in the absence of the business cycle kicking in or a recession, is in rescue finance. So that is where we are deploying record amounts of capital. And that is because interest rates have stayed high because of inflationary pressures. You've got a lot of companies with upside down capital structures. The operating business is okay. The balance sheet is not. And there's an opportunity to go in there, restructure, and ultimately deliver equity-like returns for our clients through the credit.
Katie pointed it out well, right? We've seen more people have seen Bigfoot in the last, decade and a half than a business cycle, most likely. And that means all of us are to some degree asleep. And if you think about the way private markets operate, they don't get marked routinely. And so you could sit around in a private portfolio for a long period of time and think there's no trouble under the surface whatsoever, and have really no incentive to kind of dig for that trouble under the surface. And so one way to maybe think about the convergence is not merging public and private markets, but what you might want to think about is what's going on, what are the public markets telling you that help you underwrite in the private market?
Is globalization a diversification play? Is it a safety trade? How do you think about it?
Well, we are a very, very global firm, and we have a lot of different ways to participate in those opportunities. Private equity, real estate, private credit, and infrastructure. So in really volatile periods like we're in right now, having that flexibility of capital, we could partner with companies, management teams, as a provider of anything from senior investment grade debt, right, to non-investment grade debt, to structured credit solutions, structured equity solutions, growth equity capital, to buyout capital. So, today it's an interesting market. When volatility spikes, that usually leads to really, really interesting deployment opportunities for our firm. You need to be nimble. You need to have the local reach in all these different markets. But we're excited, quite frankly, about 2025. There are going to be hiccups. There's going to be some headwinds in terms of some of these macro policies. But our ability to deploy scaled capital around the world, we think, is quite high.
I will still ask you, if not dead, then is American exceptionalism then overblown?
No, listen, I think this notion that the U.S. is going to win alone has never been the case. I think the strength of the United States is really the resiliency of the economy, the strength of our capital markets to mobilize capital to support companies in the private sector, and labor productivity, right? When you think about why the U.S. has grown faster than Europe or faster than Japan, it's really about labor productivity in the United States. A lot of that is technology-driven and innovation-driven, but a lot of that is our unique mobility of labor in this country.
I do think this is a time to prepare for kind of situational dislocations and maybe even systemic distress in different pockets of private markets, right? I think you have such a large share of venture-backed companies with less than a year of cash runway. You have pockets of distress, obviously, in real estate, and even in private credit land, you're starting to see some pretty big issues kind of emanate. And so I do think it's really difficult to really kind of plunge and really invest in a falling knife type environment. But I think it's really important for everyone, as there's increased geopolitical and macro volatility, to kind of prepare for some of those opportunities.
And this has been unfolding for a while. I mean, we saw a drop in allocations at the start of 2024 into private markets. Steve, though, you leaned a little bit into that. You're actually expanding your assets.
Yeah, I mean, we actually had a change in legislation and impacts the city of New York. So we're actually, we are in the process of increasing our exposure to alternative or private assets from 25% to 35%. I'd say the average allocation across our 5 plans is between 10 and 12% private equity. So it's been an advantage at a time when everyone else is pulling back and exits have been harder to come by. Performance hasn't been great in private equity, but I think it's a great time to be putting money to work. We were able to get better access to the top decile performers, to get size and scale, to negotiate better terms, better economics, and a healthy slug of co-investment as well, typically no fee, no carry. So those are things that I think will positively impact the portfolio longer term, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years out.
If you have such a vast private market, what do you do with that? How do you get more investors access to that?
So you nailed it. Any prediction in terms of the sustainability and durability of private capital suggests it's going to keep compounding at 10%. So it'll be a 25, $26 trillion market before we blink in terms of private capital. Now, what's happening is there are a lot of forces in the system that are driving more capital to private markets, demand from insurance clients as they look for private investment grade. And of course, the biggest factor is what's happening in wealth. And really, if you look at whether it's 1, 2, 3% of portfolios in wealth individuals' portfolios today managed by people in this room, then if that grows to 5, 6, 7%, we're talking about an enormous trend. And I think the stats on U.S. pensions, for example, 40% are in alternatives. Ultimately, retirement accounts will be in private capital. It's the perfect balance of liability and return, and it gives investors diversification. So
401ks?
Ultimately, yes, for sure. Pace of which, hard to predict. But the wealth transition to private capital, for sure, is a durable transition. Should be. The asset class makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. We've scratched the surface globally on wealthy individuals participating in these markets, so that capital stream will continue to come in.
Coming up, the race for artificial intelligence supremacy, looking for winners and losers.
There is a bunch of money being spent today that will have very low returns to no returns. But if you don't start investing, you'll never start.
What is the issue between the type of information that's being collected by investors and the marking issue that you're describing?
What mark-to-market assets do is it forces honesty into the situation. We're talking right after the DeepSeek model surprised everybody in its efficiency. It took hundreds of billions off of market caps because it legitimately raised concerns that maybe the future of AI was different. I guarantee you that if you look at other portfolios that aren't marked, they didn't move. If private assets are going to eat the world, as they say, with the equity market halving in the number of names, you come to a world that is increasingly an echo chamber. Imagine you have a firm that has some public assets and some private assets. If you see your public assets in AI going down by 20%, you're going to be thinking very, very deeply about what your private assets are worth differently than someone who just has the latter.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
Is Trump, as he says he is, ready to do transformational trade deals as long as he gets his interests taken care of? Because if he is, that gives a huge opportunity for the UK to really move the dial on its growth with the US. So I can't imagine that you would shy away from that prospect if it's genuine. What remains to be seen, is it genuine on the part of the US? And we have to test that.
Don't miss the opening trade, live every weekday.
Bloomberg has the Fed decision under surveillance with the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis, including Powell's press conference. Nobody covers the Fed like Bloomberg. U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Invest. I'm Shonali Basak. Trillions of dollars are expected to be needed to fund the artificial intelligence boom around the world. But there are risks to how it all plays out, and investors are trying to find the winners, all while avoiding investments that might lead to big losses in years ahead. At the Bloomberg Invest event in New York at the beginning of March, we spoke to some of the industry's most influential voices and heard how the intersection of AI and investing is opening up new opportunities for growth.
As you're building technological infrastructure and backbone, you're building it based on what's available today and what you know today. The whole AI backbone, infrastructure, compute, technology, it's moving very fast. But you can't wait for version 2.0 or version 3.0 or version 4.0. You have to build based on what's available today. What's available today will be obsolete a lot of it before it gets built, and it will get replaced by newer and newer versions. So there is a bunch of money being spent today that will have very low returns to no returns. But if you don't start investing, you'll never start. So you sort of have this prisoner's dilemma that I have to start building this data center, and I think I'm going to be putting XYZ chip in, but by the way it gets built in 2 years, I may not be putting, I most likely will not be putting that chip in. And the amount of power I think I need to run that data center may be dramatically less, because the next chip, I bet, is going to be a lot more efficient than the chip we have today. So a lot of this build, you can't wait for the efficient frontier, because someone's always going to be out there. You have to keep building, and there will be a lot of waste to get there. I just think it's inevitable. And then, these AI models themselves are going to build upon themselves, and they're going to get smarter and smarter, and they're going to optimize and re-optimize, and everything's going to get better and faster and quicker. And ultimately, the AI of the data center is going to tell you how to build a better data center, how to build better connectivity, how to optimize the optimization.
Digital infrastructure has been a huge theme for us. Data centers, we've been the leading investor in the world in that area. There's obviously been concern given DeepSeek, but we continue to see big demand throughout that whole sort of value chain. We love power and energy. We think we're moving to a world of very heavy electrification. It's because of data centers, reindustrialization, robotics ultimately. We invest in generation, transmission, utility services.
In the world of real estate, which is your favorite child, data centers or offices at the moment, in terms of the near-term ability to put money to work?
It's an interesting question. I think in some of these markets now, given the sharp decline in value and the lack of new supply, office buildings become interesting. You definitely want to buy more modern buildings. But I still like the data centers too. There, what's attractive is this need for compute power. I referenced DeepSeek, but obviously the cost of compute has come down pretty dramatically, and we think the usage is going to go up. There may need to be a little less training, and it may be more inference, but our lives are migrating online, and I think these data centers are a critical part of that infrastructure. So I'd say I like both of these children.
So on data centers in particular, the estimates are staggering. But they're not only staggering, they're all over the place. You've seen estimates from a need for $1 trillion or $3 trillion globally to build data centers. You've seen estimates higher than $10 trillion. Both things can't be true.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a question of what you're measuring. If it's just the physical data centers, it's probably on the lower end. But if you're talking about the GPUs that go in those data centers or the power that needs to go, then those numbers get really large, and then I'd be at the higher end. And it's a global phenomenon. I mean, if you think about where the world's going, I think our lives are going to be so impacted by this technology. What we do, how companies function, coding, customer engagement, even things like translation today now. You don't even need translation anymore because the machines can do it real time. I think margins in companies are going to expand dramatically. I think we're going to use these bots to help us do so many things in our lives. And so ultimately, I think the infrastructure spend against this will be quite significant. I'm not astute enough or knowledgeable enough to know exactly what the number is, but it feels like it's going to be very big.
And that's just a taste of what we had at Bloomberg Invest this year. And you can find much more on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Shonali Bassick in New York, and this is Bloomberg.
We want to make sure that we're exposed to categories that continue to be relevant to consumers, that we're positioned in categories where we have a competitive right to win.
By strategically adding and shedding assets, General Mills has turned over about 20% of its net sales base in the last 6 years. It's dramatically expanded its pet food platform, starting with the purchase of Blue Buffalo Pet Products in 2018. That expansion dovetailed with a boom in demand.
Pet in the U.S., pet feeding and treating, is a $50 billion category. It's almost 5 times the size of a category like cereal.
Is this the future of the company? I mean, we so much associate General Mills with breakfast and cereals, human breakfast and human cereals. Are we now going to be thinking about General Mills much more as a pet food company?
I think you'll be thinking about General Mills as a food company where we treat all the members of the family like family.
The humanization of pets is actually the biggest driver of pet food and pet treating growth. It has derivatives in not only feeding, which is the core thing that most households where most of the dollars go against the pet, but treating, and then you start to branch out to things like vitamins and minerals and supplements.
People really love their pets. They want to take care of their pets like they do their family, and it really is a global phenomenon. That's why we recently entered the China market with Blue Buffalo. That's why we bought Edgard & Cooper recently in Europe, because we see the same kinds of trends that have played out here in the U.S. playing out all over the world.
In case you missed it on Balance of Power.
Governor, I wonder if there's a silver lining in any of this for the great industrial towns of your state from the last century. Syracuse, Rochester. Based on what we're hearing from this administration, they will again have a seat at the manufacturing table. Do you believe that?
I hope so, but we haven't